This is final chapter. If you are not listening first, second, third and fourth part, then click I button and enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe this channel. The face was identical to his father's, yet somehow different, less burdened, perhaps, or simply shaped by different choices. Can I ask you something? Mark said suddenly. Of course. Do you ever think about him? The other Nolan, wonder where he is, what he's doing. Nolan was silent for a long moment. All the time, he finally admitted. He's me in a very real sense, made different by circumstance, by timing, by the absence of intervention at a critical moment. But still, me. Do you think he regrets it? Leaving Earth? Leaving us? The question hung between them, laden with years of unresolved pain. I can't speak for him, Nolan said carefully. But if he feels anything like I do, then yes, every day. Mark nodded, accepting the answer without further comment. They continued walking in companionable silence, two men from different dimensions finding unexpected common ground in their shared connections. As they reached the park exit, Nolan paused. Thank you, he said simply. For what? For giving me a chance with Oliver. For allowing me to be part of your family, complicated as it may be. Mark shrugged, though his expression was serious. Family's family, even when it comes from another dimension. Nolan smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually stern features. I'll see you tomorrow then. I shouldn't be late for Oliver's lesson. No, Mark agreed with a laugh. You definitely shouldn't. As Nolan took to the sky, Mark watched him go, reflecting on the strange turns his life had taken. A merged world, a duplicate father who wasn't quite his father, a half-brother with a complicated relationship to both versions of their shared parent. None of it made sense by any normal standard. And yet, somehow, it felt right, like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their proper arrangement, even if the picture they formed wasn't what anyone had expected. With a small smile, Mark launched himself skyward, heading home to prepare for family dinner. Question, would you guys... Hello everyone, I wish to ask you guys something. Tell me, would you guys read a self-insert fanfic as Mark after maybe this fanfic has been finished? Or maybe even soon, since I'm kinda getting close to the final arc in my mind with how things are going. I know this may feel too soon to some and a bit boring maybe as well, so wish to know if anyone would read it? Since in this case, if I do it, Mark will remember his past life as Samuel after Nolan has left Earth and gave him the beating of his life. Gotta change things up, otherwise we'd get the same thing here, which would be a boring. I would focus more on the hero aspect of Mark's life and all that, probably hell as well, just like the show seems to be doing soon. Also, I'm still gonna go with a Yandere Eve like in this one, so for that to work it will again be an AU, so just like this one there will be some significant changes, like Eve never having been with Rex. Since I personally can't imagine a Yandere having had multiple relationships, they fall in love and that's it, that's the one for them. I hope you all still like that. So yeah. Do tell me how you find this idea, and I hope to see you all later. Bye. I'm probably gonna write the first couple chapters soon so people get a feel for it and announce it here. Hope you guys don't mind. Without their sentinel, the Guardians of the Globe facility hummed with an unusual tension as two versions of the same team faced each other across the conference table. The architectural perfection of the room, all sleek lines and advanced technology, stood in stark contrast to the emotional complexity of its occupants. On one side sat the Guardians from the original timeline. The immortal, his centuries-old eyes reflecting weariness. Black Samson, the only other survivor of Omni-Man's massacre. And the newer members who had joined after the tragedy: Robot, Monster Girl, Rex Splode, Duplicate, and Shrinking Ray. Opposite them were their counterparts from the alternate timeline, the Guardians who had been spared Omni-Man's betrayal thanks to Sukuna's intervention. The same faces, the same powers, but with fundamentally different experiences shaping their perspectives. This is getting us nowhere, Alternate War Woman declared, slamming her fist on the table hard enough to crack its reinforced surface. We've been discussing defensive strategies for 3 hours, and we're still no closer to a unified approach. That's because half of your suggestions involve Sukuna's abilities, Original Rex Splode pointed out. And in case you've forgotten, he's not here. Which is precisely the problem, Alternate Darkwing said, his voice carrying that characteristic gravelly quality. Our entire planetary defense strategy was built around his capabilities. Without him, we're significantly compromised. The immortal, the original timeline's version leaned forward, his ancient eyes scanning the assembled heroes. We need to adapt. Work with what we have, not what we wish we had. Easy for you to say, alternate Red Rush countered, his words coming out in the rapid-fire pattern typical of his speech. Your version of Earth never had Sukuna in the first place. You never knew what it was like to have that level of security and then lose it. We lost our entire team, Black Samson reminded him sharply. I think we understand loss quite well. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The dimensional merger had forced these two versions of the same team together, creating tensions and alliances that no one had anticipated. Perhaps, alternate robot interjected, his mechanical voice carefully modulated to project calm. We should focus on quantifying exactly what capabilities we're missing without Sukuna, and then determine how to compensate for each one. Original robot nodded in agreement. A logical approach. I've been analyzing the combat footage from the dimensional event. Sukuna demonstrated abilities far beyond what had previously been documented. That's an understatement, alternate Martian man said. Most of us only ever saw him use those cutting techniques, dismantle and cleave. None of us knew about the shadow creatures, the adaptation abilities, or whatever that thing was. Or that he could manipulate dimensions themselves, original Monster Girl added. That's how he reversed the merger, right? The alternate immortal's expression darkened. And now he's trapped in the Emperor's dimension, along with our Mark and Eve, making their retrieval our highest priority. Higher than preparing for the Viltrumite invasion? Alternate Darkwing challenged, his tone skeptical. They're the same priority, the alternate immortal replied firmly. Sukuna is potentially our strongest asset against the Viltrumites. His ability to go toe-to-toe with the strongest Viltrumites makes him invaluable. Not to mention his strategic mind, alternate robot added. His tactical insights have shaped every major operation we've conducted for months. Alternate Rex Splode scoffed. Great, so we're screwed without him. That's real helpful. We're not screwed, original Rex countered, shooting his alternate self a disapproving look. We're disadvantaged. There's a difference. Tell that to the people out there. Alternate Rex gestured toward the window, where the city sprawled beneath them. Have you seen what they're saying online? They're connecting dots we never wanted connected. On Reddit, the r/dimensional merger subreddit had exploded with activity in the days following the global address. One thread in particular had gained significant traction. Theory, Omni-Man's real plan posted by u/truthdigger88. 2 days ago. Think about it, the one big difference between our timelines is Sukuna. In one timeline, he fought Omni-Man and suddenly Omni-Man decides he's not going to help the Viltrumites anymore. And now, just when the Viltrumites are supposedly coming, Sukuna conveniently disappears during the dimensional merger? What if Omni-Man has been playing the long game this whole time? What if he knew Sukuna was the only one who could actually stop him and the Viltrumites, so he engineered this whole dimensional crisis to get rid of him? Again, think about it, in the original timeline, Omni-Man straight up murdered the Guardians. In this timeline, he's suddenly Earth's defender? People don't change that dramatically unless they're working an angle. Edit. Holy shit, this blew up. Adding more evidence. That fight where Sukuna stopped Omni-Man happened with no witnesses. We only have Omni-Man's word for what went down. Since Sukuna disappeared, Omni-Man has positioned himself as Earth's primary defender against the Viltrumites. The timing is way too convenient, comments. You/skeptic mind. This is the dumbest conspiracy theory I've seen yet. Why would Omni-Man fake a change of heart for months just to get rid of one hero? You/deep state _agent at skeptic mind, because Sukuna was the only one who could actually hurt him. Did you see the footage of Sukuna fighting that white lion monster last year? Blurry as hell, but you can see he's fucking strong. They also came from that portal very hurt, but Omni-Man was the one more hurt. You/logical thinker. If Omni-Man wanted to eliminate Sukuna, why not just kill him directly? Why this elaborate dimensional scheme that nobody could possibly predict? You/Viltrum veteran. Because he tried and failed to kill him directly. That's the whole point. Whatever happened in that fight, Omni-Man realized he couldn't take Sukuna in a straight fight. Conspiracy buster. Y'all are reaching so hard. Omni-Man has been working with the GDA and Guardians for months. He's shared Viltrumite weaknesses, battle strategies, everything. Why do all that if he's still secretly evil? Truthseeker23 at Conspiracy Buster to gain trust. Obviously. Classic deep cover strategy. Give them enough real intel to seem legit, while hiding the biggest threat, himself. Military Intelligence 101. Meanwhile, a counter-thread had gained almost as much traction. Theory Sukuna. Our last hope posted by you/hero analyst 2 days ago. Look, I know everyone's freaking out about Sukuna being gone, but let's look at the facts. Sukuna is the only hero we know of who successfully stood up to Omni-Man and changed his mind. That fight with the white lion creature, the footage is garbage quality, but you can clearly see Sukuna was the only one who could even hurt it. During the dimensional merger, he was the one who somehow reversed it and saved both worlds from completely collapsing whatever power this guy has. It's something the Viltrumites have never encountered before. That's why we need to get him back before they arrive. And for everyone buying into that Omni-Man is still evil BS, why would he help defend Earth for months, train other heroes, and share Viltrumite weaknesses if he was still working for them? It makes no sense. Comments. You/dimensional theorist. Agree 100%. Whatever Sukuna did to Omni-Man in that fight changed everything. We need that power against the Viltrumites. You/reality check. The problem is we don't actually know what happened in that fight. No witnesses, no footage, just what we've been told afterward. You/Viltrumite defense. Exactly. For all we know, Omni-Man could have pretended to change sides just to eliminate the one being who could stop him. You/objective observer. Again, like I've said to all you idiots, that makes no fucking sense. If Omni-Man wanted to eliminate Sukuna, he's had months to do it. Why wait until now? You/pattern recognition. Because now he has a perfect alibi. Oh no! Poor Sukuna got lost in another dimension. How sad. Nothing I could do about it. Meanwhile, the real invasion can begin with no one to stop it. You/rational analysis. You conspiracy nuts are something else. If Omni-Man was still working for the Viltrumites, why would he expose their entire invasion plan? Why reveal their weaknesses? Why train his son to fight them? On Twitter, the debate had spilled over into mainstream conversation at World News Daily. Conspiracy theories about Omni-Man's true intentions trend worldwide as public grapples with Sukuna's absence. Experts warn of dangerous speculation during global crisis. #Omni-Man conspiracy #whereas Sukuna at Defense Analyst 1/ Let's examine the facts. Sukuna stopped Omni-Man's betrayal in one timeline. Now Sukuna is gone, and we're supposed to trust Omni-Man as our primary defense against Viltrumites? The strategic vulnerability is obvious at Fact Check Now analysis. Claims that Omni-Man engineered dimensional merger to eliminate Sukuna rated as highly unlikely. No evidence supports this theory, and significant evidence contradicts it. #Facts Matter at Conspiracy Watch. The Omni-Man conspiracy theories are spreading faster than we can debunk them. This is exactly what happens when fear meets incomplete information. #Media Literacy at Truth Unveiled. Wake up! The timing is too perfect. Viltrumites coming. Sukuna vanishes. Omni-Man positions himself as Earth's savior? How are people not seeing this? #Omni-Man Long Con at Rational Thought. If Omni-Man wanted Earth conquered, he could have let it happen in the original timeline. Hell, he can still do it fucking now. He's the strongest on the planet right now, so why in the hell change course, reveal the Viltrumite plan, then engineer an elaborate scheme after the removal of the hero is already done? If you idiots were right, it makes no logical sense. #Critical Thinking back at the Guardians facility. Alternate War Woman gestured at her tablet displaying some of these social media posts. The public is dividing into factions, she said grimly. Half think Omni-Man engineered this whole situation to eliminate Sukuna. Half think Sukuna is our only hope against the Viltrumites. Either way, they're realizing just how essential he was to our operations. Let them speculate, the original Immortal replied. What matters is our response, not public perception. Public perception drives policy, alternate Darkwing countered. If people believe we're vulnerable without Sukuna, panic follows. If they believe Omni-Man betrayed us again, trust in our defense planning collapses. Either way, we lose. Original Monster Girl leaned forward, studying the social media feeds with growing concern. Some of these people are getting surprisingly close to the truth about Sukuna's importance. How did they connect these dots with so little actual information? Humans are pattern recognition machines, alternate robot explained. Give them enough data points, and they'll connect dots even when we try to keep those dots separate. The question remains, the alternate immortal said, redirecting the conversation. How do we retrieve Sukuna and the others from the Emperor's dimension? Alternate war woman crossed her arms. Our scientists have been working on it non-stop. The dimensional barriers are too strong to breach with conventional technology. Then we need unconventional technology, Original Rex suggested. Or unconventional allies, the alternate immortal said quietly. All eyes turned to him, the room falling silent as they waited for him to continue. The dimensional barriers are often described as the walls of heaven in various mythologies, the immortal explained. If heaven has walls, then perhaps hell has doors. A new voice completed from the doorway. The assembled heroes turned to see a figure standing at the entrance to the conference room, a broad-shouldered man in a trench coat. His skin an unnatural shade of red, his eyes glowing with an inner fire. A pair of small horns protruded from his forehead, and he carried himself with the weary determination of someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness. Damien Darkblood, the alternate immortal acknowledged. Thank you for coming. You said it was important, Darkblood replied, his gravelly voice filling the room as he stepped inside. Something about breaching dimensional barriers. We need to reach another dimension, the immortal explained, to retrieve our missing teammates, including Sukuna. Darkblood's eyes narrowed. The one who stopped Omni-Man. The one who manipulated dimensions during the merger. I've been studying what little footage exists of him. Impressive power. Can you help us? Alternate War Woman asked directly. Darkblood surveyed the assembled heroes, his expression unreadable. Perhaps. Hell exists between dimensions. Its paths don't follow the same rules as mortal world. So you can create a portal? Original Monster Girl asked eagerly. Not directly, Darkblood corrected. But I might know someone who can. An old acquaintance. From my days before exile. Another demon? Alternate Darkwing asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Something older, Darkblood replied cryptically. Something that existed before hell had a name. The immortal leaned forward. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, we need to try. Earth's survival may depend on it. Darkblood studied him for a long moment, then gave a single curt nod. I'll make contact, but I warn you now, deals with such entities always come with a price. One that's rarely obvious until it's too late. We'll pay it, the immortal declared, his ancient eyes reflecting a determination born of countless battles. Whatever it takes to bring Sukuna home. As the demon detective turned to leave, alternate Martian man voiced the question on everyone's mind. Why help us? What's your stake in this? Darkblood paused at the doorway, his massive frame silhouetted against the corridor lights. I've spent centuries seeking redemption. World fears me. If the Viltrumites come, world ends. And with it, any chance I have of earning my way back to the light. He glanced back over his shoulder, his eyes burning with an intensity that made several heroes flinch. Besides, I have a professional interest. Sukuna intrigues me. I'd like to meet the being who can bend reality itself to his will. With that, he was gone, leaving the assembled guardians in a silence heavy with both hope and apprehension. Are we really doing this? Original Rex asked finally. Making deals with whatever that acquaintance is? Do we have a choice? Alternate War Woman countered. Without Sukuna, our chances against the Viltrumites drop significantly. The alternate immortal rose from his seat, his decision made. We proceed, with caution, but without hesitation. If the power of hell can bypass the walls of heaven, then we use it. whatever the cost. As the meeting adjourned, the two versions of the Guardians filed out, their earlier tensions temporarily set aside in the face of this new, desperate plan. But the unspoken question lingered in each of their minds. What price would they ultimately have to pay for such supernatural assistance? And would Earth survive long enough for their gamble to pay off? In a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the city, Damien Darkblood sat alone, nursing a drink that smoldered faintly in its glass. The other patrons gave his table a wide berth, instinctively sensing the otherworldly nature of its occupant. He removed a small, ancient-looking object from his trenchcoat, a tarnished brass compass whose needle spun erratically, occasionally pointing in directions that didn't seem to correspond to any earthly orientation. "Old friend," he murmured to the object, "it's time to call in that favor you owe me." The compass needle suddenly stopped spinning, pointing directly downward with such force that it cracked the table beneath it. The temperature in the bar dropped precipitously, glasses frosting over, patrons' breath becoming visible in the suddenly frigid air. Darkblood nodded, satisfied. "I thought that might get your attention." He pocketed the compass and tossed some bills on the table, heading for the exit as confused patrons looked around for the source of the sudden cold. Outside, he paused, looking up at the night sky where dimensional energy still occasionally rippled across the stars' aftershocks of the merger. "The walls of heaven," he mused aloud. "Let's see if hell's doors are any more accommodating." With that, he vanished into the shadows, a demon detective on a mission to breach dimensions and perhaps, in the process, save the world that had exiled him. Seeking the fallen, the morning light filtered through the high windows of the GDA's secure conference room, casting long shadows across the assembled heroes. Original Mark paced restlessly at the head of the table, his costume showing signs of a sleepless night. "Run this by me again," he said, turning to face the immortal. "We're going to contact Hell to find a way to reach the Emperor's dimension." The alternate immortal nodded. "The conventional approaches have failed. Our scientists have been working around the clock with no breakthrough. Dimensional barriers are simply too strong to breach with our current technology." Original Eve leaned forward, her scientific skepticism evident. "And we're sure this isn't just trading one problem for another? Dealing with demons seems like a classic cure worse than the disease scenario." "I get your concerns," Nolan said from his position by the window, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the floor. "In my centuries of travel, I've run into demons. They're not exactly known for their charity work. Which is why we proceed with extreme caution," the alternate immortal replied. "But we can't afford to dismiss any avenue that might reunite us with our missing teammates." "Look," Original Mark interjected, "I barely know Sukuna. Met him, a couple days before everything went sideways? But from what I've seen, he's our best shot against the Viltrumites. If this demon stuff is our only lead, I say we follow it." "Easy for you to say," Original Rex scoffed from his seat. "You're not the one who's going to have nightmares about blood rituals for the next month." "Like you need help having nightmares," Alternate Rex shot back. "You scream in your sleep when you watch cooking shows. That was one time, and it was a particularly brutal elimination round." The door opened, interrupting their bickering, and Damien Darkblood entered, his massive red form drawing all eyes in the room. He carried a small leather satchel that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. "You're late," Original Mark said, not bothering to hide his nervousness about the whole thing. "Time flows differently where I've been," Darkblood replied, his gravelly voice filling the room. He moved to the center of the space where a large area had been cleared of furniture. "I needed specific materials, not easy to find in this merged world." He knelt, opening the satchel to reveal various objects that seemed to defy conventional description. Bones that glowed with an inner light, vials of liquid that moved against gravity, and small stones inscribed with symbols that hurt the eyes if observed too directly. "What exactly is the plan here?" Original Eve asked, her curiosity battling with obvious discomfort. "First, we contact an old associate of mine," Darkblood explained as he began arranging the objects in a precise pattern. Someone who might point us to the being we need. One of the few who can breach dimensional barriers without destroying both worlds in the process. And who is this associate? Nolan asked, crossing his arms. Darkblood paused, looking up at the assembled heroes. A teacher. One who showed humanity things they weren't meant to know. His name is Penemu. The Fallen Watcher. Alternate robot interjected, his mechanical voice betraying no emotion despite the ominous subject. From apocryphal texts, associated with teaching humans writing and deception. Correct, Darkblood acknowledged, returning to his preparations. He walks the boundaries between realms, not powerful enough to help us directly, but knowledgeable enough to point us in the right direction. So we're asking one demon where to find another demon? Original Eve clarified. That doesn't sound like a slippery slope at all. These beings aren't demons in the traditional sense, Darkblood corrected. They're fallen angels, watchers who betrayed their purpose. Different category entirely. Oh, well, that makes me feel so much better, Original Rex muttered. From a small ornate dagger, Darkblood drew a line across his palm, allowing thick, dark blood to drip onto the arranged objects. The blood seemed to move with purpose, flowing into patterns more complex than gravity should allow. The blood of the exiled opens paths denied to mortals, he intoned, his voice taking on a rhythmic quality that resonated strangely in the room's acoustics. The heroes watched in uneasy fascination as Darkblood began to trace sigils on the floor with his bleeding palm, each symbol briefly flaring with crimson light before settling into a pulsing glow. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with an energy that raised the hair on the back of everyone's necks. Is this safe? Original Mark whispered to the alternate immortal. No. The original immortal replied simply, having overheard. But necessary. That's not exactly reassuring, Original Eve said, moving closer to Mark. Maybe we should set some boundaries before we open a direct line to whatever this is. Boundaries are wise, Darkblood agreed without looking up from his work. Do not step within the circle once it's complete. Do not offer anything, information, possessions, promises, unless I indicate it's safe. And most importantly, do not interrupt the ritual once it begins. Great, Alternate Rex groaned. More rules to worry about breaking. Just keep your mouth shut and you'll be fine, his original self advised. Darkblood completed the circle of sigils, then stood at its edge, raising both hands. By blood and memory, by oath and exile, I call upon Penemu, teacher of secrets, keeper of forbidden knowledge. Appear before us, bound by the terms of our ancient pact. For a moment nothing happened. Then the blood sigils began to smoke, the crimson liquid turning to mist that rose and swirled in the center of the circle. The mist thickened, condensing into a vaguely humanoid shape before suddenly snapping into focus. Where empty air had been moments before, now stood a figure that seemed simultaneously substantial and ephemeral. Tall and willowy, with features that shifted subtly when not directly observed, Penemu wore what appeared to be ancient scholarly robes that flowed around him like liquid shadow. His eyes gleamed with an intelligence that bordered on madness, and when he smiled, his teeth seemed too numerous and too sharp. Damien, my disgraced pupil, Penemu exclaimed, his voice carrying an accent from no earthly language. How delightful to be summoned from my studies. And you've brought friends. How uncharacteristically social of you. He spun in a circle, taking in the assembled heroes with evident delight. Ah, mortals with power beyond their understanding. My favorite kind. Though. He paused, studying Nolan with narrowed eyes. Not all mortal are we? Fascinating specimen. From beyond the stars, yet thinking himself one of them. Delicious irony. Penemu? Darkblood growled, clearly uncomfortable with the fallen angel's erratic behavior. We seek information, not entertainment. Information as entertainment, my dour friend, Penemu replied, performing an elaborate bow that somehow bent at angles that shouldn't be possible. It's all I have to trade these days. Ask your questions, then. Let's see if they're worth answering. The alternate immortal stepped forward. We seek a way to reach another dimension. A specific one, where 3 of our companions are trapped. Dimensions? Penemu mused, tapping a finger against his chin. So many walls between worlds. So many doors left ajar. You'll need to be more specific, Ancient One. The multiverse is vast, and my knowledge, while extensive, is not unlimited. We're looking for what we call the Emperor's Dimension, Original Mark said, stepping closer to the circle, but careful not to cross its boundary. A world ruled by another version of me, a Viltrumite emperor who's taken our friends captive, including Sukuna, the alternate immortal added. He's essential to our defense against the coming Viltrumite invasion. At the mention of Sukuna's name, Penemu froze mid-gesture, his constantly shifting features suddenly still. Sukuna? He repeated, his voice losing its manic quality. You seek the first son of heaven? He began pacing within the circle, muttering to himself in languages no human had spoken for millennia. Occasionally he would stop, make an elaborate gesture as if writing in the air, then resume his agitated movement. Interesting, he murmured. The patterns align, the cycles repeat. The first son walks among mortals once more, and the walls between worlds grow thin. Of course. What are you talking about? Original Eve demanded, confusion evident in her voice. What's this first son of heaven business? Penemu stopped his pacing, fixing Mark with a stare that seemed to look through him rather than at him. Your Sukuna, the one you seek to retrieve, is the first son of heaven. In all timelines, all realities where he exists, this remains constant, though few remember it, including often himself. He resumed his erratic movement, hands weaving complex patterns in the air. Your world's version appears to be one born in the modern era, a rarity, most manifest in ancient times. He stands at the crossroads of destiny, capable of being savior or destroyer. It seems in your reality, he has chosen the path of the Messiah he was always meant to be. Wait, back up, Original Mark interrupted, clearly struggling with the concept. Are you saying Sukuna is like Jesus or something? His discomfort with the spiritual question was evident, his experience with demons and divine matters limited at best, non-existent at worst. Penemu cackled, the sound echoing strangely in the confined space. No, not in that sense. He brings no scripture, delivers no prophecies. He is a Messiah in the most literal sense, a protector against evil, a shield against darkness. That type of savior. His expression turned contemplative. But it seems you've lost yours. How careless. This is all very interesting, Original Eve cut in, and definitely something we should dig into later. But right now, we need to know if there's a way to reach the Emperor's world and bring our friends home. Hold on, Nolan said, stepping forward. If Sukuna is this first son of heaven, why didn't we know about it? Why doesn't he seem to know about it himself? Penemu's features rippled like water disturbed by a stone. The knowledge of one's divine nature is often suppressed. Sometimes by external forces, sometimes by the individual themselves. The burden of divinity is not easily borne. Are you saying he's not human? Original Mark asked, struggling to process this new information. Oh, he's quite human, Penemu assured him with a dismissive wave. Just more. A vessel containing greater purpose. Like a cup filled with ocean water. Still a cup, but carrying something of the vastness within. That doesn't make any sense, Original Rex complained. Either he's human or he isn't. You're not listening, Penemu lamented with theatrical disappointment. This is why your species struggles so. He is human and divine. Since one is species, the other is status, a purpose. Okay, this is getting us nowhere, Original Eve interjected firmly. Can you help us reach the Emperor's dimension or not? Penemu shrugged, his shoulders moving in a way that suggested more joints than a human body should possess. I don't even know what world you're talking about, my dear. The Emperor's dimension means nothing to me. You'll need to find someone with more specific knowledge. So this was a complete waste of time, alternate Rex grumbled. Not entirely, the original immortal countered. We've learned something significant about our missing ally. Darkblood stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the fallen angel. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, he said, his voice lower than before. But I must ask, do you know where Gadriel is? The effect was immediate and dramatic. Penemu's shifting features solidified into an expression of absolute seriousness, all traces of his earlier manic behavior vanishing. Gadriel? He repeated, the name seeming to carry weight beyond its syllables. You would seek him out? Several of the assembled heroes exchanged confused glances. Who's Gadriel? Original Mark asked. The Sentinel of Eden, alternate robot explained. According to apocryphal texts, he was the angel charged with guarding the Garden of Eden, the fallen angel who allowed Satan entry. One of the Watchers. So another fallen angel, Original Eve clarified. But one more powerful than Penemu? Not just more powerful, Darkblood corrected grimly. Gadriel was the guardian of the gates, the sentinel whose failure allowed evil to enter paradise. His punishment was severe. I know nothing of Gadriel's whereabouts, Penemu stated flatly, all playfulness gone from his demeanor. And if that's what you wish to ask about, then our conversation is concluded. Wait! Original Mark called out. We're just trying to find our friends. If you can't help us directly, maybe you can point us to someone who can. Someone other than Gadriel, the alternate immortal added quickly, noting Penemu's reaction. Penemu seemed to consider this for a moment, his features shifting more rapidly than before. There are others, lesser entities who might assist, but their prices are steep, and their trustworthiness questionable at best. We'll take our chances, Nolan said firmly. Your confidence is charming, Penemu replied with a smile that revealed far too many teeth. But misplaced. Seek the Crossroads King if you must, or the Librarian of Forgotten Texts. Both know paths between worlds. Where can we find them? Original Eve asked. Where all forgotten things go, Penemu replied cryptically. Where lost souls wander and memories fade. The borderlands, child. The edges of hell itself. Before anyone could ask for clarification, Penemu began to dissolve, the mist that formed his body dispersing and returning to its original state as blood. The liquid splattered across the floor, droplets spraying several of the heroes who stood closest to the circle. Ugh! Gross! Original Rex exclaimed, wiping blood from his face with evident disgust. A little warning would have been nice. Well, that was spectacularly unhelpful. Original Eve sighed, using her molecular powers to remove the blood from her costume. Not entirely, Nolan disagreed. We have new leads, this Crossroads King and Librarian, and we've learned something significant about Megumi. Darkblood knelt, beginning to gather his materials with methodical precision. The Crossroads King is dangerous. He trades in souls and destinies. The Librarian is more academic, but no less perilous to approach. So what now? The Immortal asked, his ancient eyes fixed on the demon detective. Darkblood stood, securing his satchel. I'll continue making inquiries through my own channels. There are other entities who might know more about these beings, though approaching them carries significant risk. And if those inquiries fail? Nolan pressed. Then we may have no choice but to venture into the borderlands ourselves. Darkblood replied grimly. To seek out those who can breach dimensional barriers directly. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. A journey to the edges of hell, the original immortal mused. In all my centuries, I never thought I'd contemplate such a thing. You need to decide if you're willing to go that far, Darkblood stated bluntly. Because once that journey begins, there's no turning back. The price for such knowledge is always higher than you expect. Original Mark looked around at the assembled heroes, then back to Darkblood. I don't know about selling my soul or anything that dramatic, but I'm willing to take risks to bring them back. Fine. Me too. especially if Sukuna is as important to our defense as everyone says. Alternate Rex grumbled. It's not just about defense, Alternate War Woman interjected. Those are our friends, our teammates. We don't leave our own behind. Exactly, Original Eve agreed. And if these borderlands are our best shot at finding them, then that's where we need to go. This isn't a decision to make lightly, Nolan cautioned. I've seen beings that claim to be from other planes of existence. Their power is real, but so are their deceptions. Which is why we proceed with caution, the original immortal stated. Dark Blood, continue your inquiries. Find us a safer approach if possible. But understand that if no alternative presents itself, we are prepared to take more drastic measures. Dark Blood studied them for a long moment, then nodded. Your determination is admirable. Foolish, perhaps, but admirable. He turned toward the door. I'll return when I have more information. Be prepared for what comes next. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine. As the demon detective departed, the heroes were left contemplating the blood-stained floor and the unsettling revelations that had emerged from their brief contact with the supernatural. The first son of heaven, Original Eve murmured, more to herself than the others. What else don't we know about Sukuna? More importantly, Nolan added, what else doesn't he know about himself? You guys are missing the obvious question. Original Rex interjected. If Sukuna is some kind of divine whatever, why would he need our help in the first place? Shouldn't he be able to, miracle himself back here? Maybe his powers don't work that way, Original Mark suggested. Or maybe he doesn't understand what he is. Or maybe that fallen angel was just messing with us, Alternate Rex countered, throwing out cryptic nonsense to watch us chase our tails. No, the immortal said firmly. Penemu was genuinely surprised by Sukuna's name. His reaction was not feigned. So what do we do with this information? Original Eve asked. Do we tell some of the others? The public is already spinning conspiracy theories about Sukuna's importance, so the possibility of leakage would become greater if we do. We keep it contained for now, the alternate immortal decided. Until we understand more, this knowledge stays in this room. The others nodded in agreement, though uncertainty lingered in their expressions. Well, that was a whole lot of crazy for a Tuesday morning, Original Rex finally said, breaking the tension. Anyone else need a drink? Because I definitely need a drink. His alternate self nodded in agreement. Make mine a double. Or better yet, the whole damn bottle. As the group began to disperse, Original Mark lingered, staring at the blood sigils that still faintly pulsed with otherworldly energy. The revelation about Sukuna had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. You okay? Original Eve asked, returning to his side. Just processing, he replied. A while ago, my biggest worry was keeping my grades up while fighting bad guys. Now we're summoning fallen angels and talking about journeys to hell. Eve placed a hand on his shoulder. One step at a time, right? First, we find a way to reach the Emperor's dimension. Then we bring our friends home. Then we deal with the Viltrumites. And somewhere in there, figure out if one of our allies is actually some kind of divine being, Mark added with a weak smile. Just another day in our insane new merged reality, Eve said, attempting to lighten the mood. Mark nodded, but his thoughts remained troubled as they left the conference room. The question that haunted him wasn't just about Sukuna's true nature, but about what it meant for all of them, for this fragile, doubled world facing threats from beyond the stars. If even heaven had taken an interest in their struggle to send a literal savior, then how dire was their situation truly? Okay, chill. The private estate nestled in the mountains of Kyoto exuded an atmosphere of ancient luxury. Traditional architecture blended seamlessly with modern comforts, creating a sanctuary that existed outside the normal flow of time, much like its current occupants. Yakuna followed Uram through the polished wooden corridors, his eyes taking in the calligraphy scrolls and priceless artifacts that adorned the walls. Though he would never admit it aloud, there was comfort in Uram's presence, a constant that had remained unchanged through centuries while he was asleep, while empires rose and fell around their unconscious forms. The preparations are complete, Sukuna-sama, Yuram said, her voice carrying that perfect balance of deference and familiarity that only she had mastered. Kenjaku awaits in the main chamber. Yakuna nodded, studying Yuram's profile as she led the way. In many ways, she was the closest thing to family he had ever known, taken in as a child, raised under his guidance, shaped into his most loyal servant. Not that he would ever acknowledge such sentimentality aloud. "You disapprove," he stated rather than asked, noting the subtle tension in her shoulders. Yuram's expression remained carefully neutral. "It is not my place to approve or disapprove of your decisions, Sukuna-sama. And yet you do." A hint of amusement colored his voice. "Speak freely. I allow you that privilege." She hesitated only briefly. "I question the wisdom of allying with Kenjaku. Her motives have always been opaque. Even to you. All the more reason to keep her close," Yakuna replied. "Besides, her resources are valuable. Her knowledge essential." They arrived at an ornate door decorated with intricate carvings of mythical beasts. Yuram paused, her hand resting on the handle. "And the other matter?" she asked quietly. "The incarnation ritual?" Yakuna's expression hardened. "Proceed as planned." Yuram bowed slightly before sliding the door open, revealing a spacious chamber dominated by a low table surrounded by cushions. The room was illuminated by traditional paper lanterns, casting a warm glow that softened the austere elegance of the space. Kenjaku sat at the far end of the table, her appearance striking in its contrast to Yakuna's memories. No longer inhabiting Suguru Geto's body, she had returned to a female form, specifically that of Kaori Itadori. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a simple style that emphasized her sharp features and calculating eyes. "The King of Curses honors me with his presence," Kenjaku greeted, her voice carrying that familiar blend of mockery and genuine respect. "I was beginning to wonder if you had changed your mind." "I don't change my mind," Yakuna replied, taking a seat across from her. "I merely prioritize." Kenjaku smiled, pouring sake into 2 delicate cups. "And I've risen in your priorities." "How flattering." Yakuna accepted the cup but didn't drink, studying her with narrowed eyes. "You've changed vessels again. I thought you were content with Geto's body." "I extracted his technique before the transfer," Kenjaku explained, gesturing to herself. "While men's bodies offer certain physical advantages, I find I prefer returning to a woman's form. It is, after all, my original state." Her smile turned predatory. "Besides, I've accumulated enough power that physical differences are largely irrelevant now." Yakuna took a small sip of sake, savoring the quality. "You've done as I asked?" "Of course." Kenjaku rose gracefully. "Though I must admit, your request surprised me. The last time we discussed Yorozu, you nearly killed me for even suggesting her revival." She led them toward a sliding door at the rear of the chamber. "What changed, I wonder?" Yakuna didn't answer immediately, his mind turning to the revelations of recent weeks. The dimensional merger had provided unexpected insights, glimpses of his counterpart's life, abilities, and choices. The Invincible he had killed before meeting the Emperor had carried memories of that fool Angstrom Levy's briefings, information about the other Sukuna that had been illuminating. "Perspective," he finally replied. "I've gained perspective." Kenjaku's eyebrow rose slightly, but she said nothing as she slid open the door, revealing a smaller chamber beyond. The room was dimly lit, dominated by a large futon in its center. Atop it lay a female figure, her skin adorned with intricate ritual markings in red ochre. Even unconscious, Sumiki Fushiguro's face carried a serene beauty that belied the chaos about to unfold within her. "The vessel is prepared," Kenjaku said, gesturing toward the sleeping woman. "The markings will facilitate Yorozu's full incarnation as you requested." Yakuna approached slowly, his eyes tracing the symbols painted across Tsumiki's forehead. The irony wasn't lost on him, using Megumi Fushiguro's sister as the vessel for Yorozu's rebirth. In another dimension, another version of himself had become a Fushiguro and was seemingly transformed by it, elevated him to new heights of power. "Begin," he commanded, stepping back to give Kenjaku space to work. Kenjaku knelt beside the futon, placing her hands on either side of Tsumiki's head. Her fingers began to glow with an eerie blue light as she chanted in a language older than recorded history. The markings on Tsumiki's skin responded, pulsing with rhythmic intensity as the incarnation ritual took hold. As Yakuna watched, his mind returned to the revelation that had shaken him to his core. His counterpart had surpassed him. The other Sukuna had achieved powers that Yakuna himself had never mastered, including the ability to manipulate the heavens themselves. And he had done so not through isolation and domination, but through connection. It was unacceptable, yet undeniable. The King of Curses did not ignore evidence simply because it contradicted his preconceptions. If connection truly offered a path to greater power, then he would explore it, albeit on his own terms, beginning with those whose loyalty and devotion were already proven. A sudden gasp from the futon drew his attention back to the present. Tsumiki's body arched upward, her eyes flying open to reveal irises that glowed with unnatural light. The markings on her skin flared brilliantly before sinking beneath the surface, disappearing as they were absorbed into her changing flesh. When the light faded, the woman who sat up was Tsumiki in form only. Her movements, her presence, the very way she held herself, all had changed. Her eyes fixed on Yakuna with an intensity that bordered on madness. "My lord," Yorozu breathed, her voice carrying that distinctive musical quality that had once irritated him so profoundly. "You've called me back." Without warning, she launched herself from the futon, heedless of her state of undress, and threw her arms around Yakuna's neck. In the past, he would have struck her down for such presumption. This time, he allowed the contact, his expression unreadable as she pressed herself against him. "My love," she whispered against his chest. "After all this time, you've finally accepted me." Yuram and Kenjaku exchanged surprised glances as Yakuna failed to push Yorozu away or punish her for her boldness. Instead, he stood motionless, allowing her embrace while his mind calculated, analyzed, considered. His counterpart had gained unprecedented power through connection, through bonds that Yakuna had always rejected as weakness. The evidence once again was irrefutable. This other Sukuna had transcended limitations that still bound Yakuna himself. Perhaps there was something to this path after all. Not the sentimental nonsense humans called love, but a strategic utilization of the bonds others formed with him. Yorozu's obsession, Kenjaku's ambition, Yuram's loyalty, all could be leveraged, channeled, directed toward his advancement. With sudden decisiveness, Yakuna gripped Yorozu's shoulders and pushed her back just far enough to look into her eyes. Then, in a move that shocked all present, he pulled her forward again and claimed her mouth in a dominating kiss. Yorozu melted against him, a moan of surprised delight escaping her as her centuries-old fantasy finally materialized. When he released her, she stared up at him with dazed wonder. "My lord," she whispered. "Why now, after rejecting me for so long?" "I have my reasons," Yakuna replied cryptically, his gaze shifting to include Kenjaku, who watched the scene with undisguised interest. "Come here," he commanded her. Kenjaku tilted her head, a slow smile spreading across her face as understanding dawned. "Well, this is an unexpected development," she purred, approaching with the confident grace of a predator. "And here I thought you found human desires beneath you." "I find nothing beneath me," Yakuna corrected, his voice carrying that imperial authority that brooked no argument. "I simply choose what serves my purpose." Yorozu's expression darkened as she realized his intentions. "No," she hissed, turning toward Kenjaku with murderous intent. "No concubines, no others, only me. I've waited centuries for you, my love. I won't share." Yakuna's hand shot out, gripping her chin with enough force to silence her immediately. "You misunderstand your position," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I do what I want, when I want, however I want. If you wish to remain by my side, you live by my rules, my desires." For a moment, rebellion flashed in Yorozu's eyes. Then, slowly, she nodded within his grip. As you wish, my lord, she conceded. Her gaze hardened as she looked at Kenjaku. But know that I will kill her eventually. Yukuna's lips curved in a cold smile. You're welcome to try, he said, releasing her chin. Any woman too weak to survive your jealousy is unworthy of my time anyway. Kenjaku laughed, the sound rich with genuine amusement. My, how things have changed, she observed, crossing her arms. Are you truly serious about this, Sukuna? This isn't exactly consistent with your previous philosophy. Have I ever not been serious? Yakuna countered. I won't repeat myself. Kenjaku studied him for a long moment, her eyes calculating, measuring. Then, with a graceful shrug, she began to undo the elaborate ties of her kimono. As you wish, she said, allowing the silken garment to pool at her feet. Though I must say, this is a rather dramatic change of heart. The last time I offered myself to you was nearly 1,000 years ago. Yakuna approached her, his imposing height enhanced through modifications to Yuta Okatsu's body, with Mahito's ability allowing him to tower over her. He gripped her chin much as he had Yorozu's, tilting her face up to his. You wanted this even then, he stated rather than asked. It's why you were so eager to serve me. Kenjaku didn't deny it. I offered once, she admitted, her eyes glittering with ancient ambition. You rejected me quite emphatically. Yakuna pushed her against the wall, pinning her wrists above her head with one hand. Is that why you took part of my soul? He demanded, his voice a dangerous purr. Why you fashioned that false twin, that imitation of me, to sire the brat with? A flash of genuine surprise crossed Kenjaku's features before her composure returned. You knew about that? Impressive. Yes, that was part of my motivation, she admitted. Though I'm still rather annoyed that you killed our son. Yakuna laughed, the sound lacking any real warmth. If you want, I could bestow upon you another, he offered, his free hand tracing the curve of her jaw. My counterpart as well had a child on the way, something I sensed perhaps I should explore that avenue as well, he thought, recalling the memories he had gleaned. 2 devoted women, just as I shall have. Though his second isn't quite his yet, from what I recall. Since it was that other version of his woman from that emperor's world, I could practically taste her obsession towards him as I was falling through the cracks in the walls of the heavens. But I know she will be his soon enough, knowing myself as I do. Kenjaku's eyes widened fractionally, genuine interest replacing her usual calculated mask. Now that, she murmured, would be a fascinating experiment. Yorozu watched from the futon, her expression a complex mixture of jealousy and arousal. My lord, she called, her voice carrying that musical quality that had once grated on his nerves. Come, let me show you what I've dreamed of for centuries. Yakuna released Kenjaku and turned toward the bed, his decision made. Connection had given his counterpart unprecedented power. He would explore this path, but on his own terms, beginning with the carnal. The physical, the domination he understood best. Perhaps, in time, he would discover what his counterpart had found, the true source of power that had allowed him the will, the way to transcend heaven's bounds. Yuram, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, bowed deeply. I will leave you to your negotiations, Sukuna-sama, she said, her voice carefully neutral despite the discomfort evident in her posture. Please call if you require anything. As she slipped from the room, closing the door silently behind her, Yakuna removed his outer garments, his eyes moving between the 2 women who had pursued him across centuries. Both powerful in their own right, both devoted to him in their own ways, both potentially useful in his quest to surpass his counterpart. Now, he said, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to absolute obedience. Let us explore this new path, together. Outside in the corridor, Yuram leaned against the wall, her expression troubled as she listened to the sounds beginning to emerge from the chamber. She had served Sukuna faithfully for centuries, had witnessed his cruelty and his brilliance in equal measure. But this new direction, this was unprecedented. What has changed you, Sukuna-sama? She whispered to the empty hallway. What did you see in that other world that has shifted your path so dramatically? Whatever it was, she would adapt as she always had. Her loyalty to the King of Curses transcended understanding, transcended reason. If he had chosen a new direction, she would follow even if that path led to places she had never imagined they would go. She was his daughter after all, and a good daughter always follows her father. With a silent sigh, she straightened and walked away, leaving her master to explore his new strategy for power. The world was changing. Dimensions were shifting. And apparently, even the King of Curses was not immune to evolution. A father's love. Kenji Fushiguro stared out the reinforced window of his GDA-assigned quarters, watching as the merged world continued its uneasy adjustment to its new reality. The view from the 15th floor offered a panorama of what had once been two separate cities, now fused into a sprawling metropolis with architectural styles that clashed and complemented each other in equal measure. 2 weeks had passed since the dimensional merger, since Megumi had disappeared. 2 weeks of helplessness, of waiting, of prayers offered to gods he'd never particularly believed in before. Mr. Fushiguro? Kenji turned to find Agent Call standing in the doorway, a tray of food balanced in one hand. The GDA agent had been one of his primary handlers since he'd been moved to the facility for protective custody, the same agent who had been present that day when Megumi revealed his secret identity as Sukuna. "I brought dinner," she said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "And Director Stedman asked me to provide an update on the search efforts." Kenji's heart quickened. Have they found something? Any sign of him? The hope in his voice was painful to hear, even to his own ears. Agent Call's expression softened with sympathy. "Nothing concrete yet, sir. But they've made contact with someone who might be able to help breach the dimensional barrier. A specialist in unconventional travel methods." "A demon," Kenji said flatly. "I overheard the guards talking. Mark told me as well. They're planning to make deals with demons to find my nephew." Agent Call didn't deny it. "Director Stedman is exploring all available options. The situation is complicated." Kenji turned back to the window, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his worry. "When I agreed to protective custody, I thought it would be temporary. A few days at most. The merger changed everything," Agent Call reminded him gently. "The GDA is stretched thin managing the integration of two worlds. And with the Viltrumite threat looming." "I know," Kenji sighed. "I understand the priorities. But Megumi is out there somewhere in another dimension with that emperor who's obsessed with him." He ran a hand through his graying hair, the strain of the past weeks evident in the new lines etched into his face. "I should be doing something. Anything. Instead, I'm stuck here, useless." "You're not useless, Mr. Fushiguro," Agent Call assured him. "You're providing valuable insight into Megumi's personality, his habits, his thinking patterns. That information could be crucial when we locate him." Kenji gave a bitter laugh. "I answer the same questions every day, and for what? My nephew is still gone. And I'm still here, in this gilded cage." Agent Call hesitated, then said, "Sir, I know this is difficult, but Megumi would want you safe. He made that clear to Director Stedman before everything happened." Kenji's expression softened at the mention of his nephew's concern for him. It was so typical of Megumi, always thinking of others, always protecting those he cared about, even while facing unimaginable dangers himself. "He's always been that way, you know," Kenji said quietly, more to himself than to Agent Colonel, even as a child, after his parents died. "He never cried in front of me, never complained. Just adapted. Became what he needed to be to survive." He moved to the small shelf where he kept the few personal items the GDA had allowed him to bring: a family photo, a worn paperback novel, a small jade figurine that had belonged to Megumi's mother. "I was all he had left," Kenji continued, picking up the photo. "And I had no idea how to raise a child. I was a field medic in the army, used to patching up wounds and moving on. Not healing the kind of wounds he carried." Agent Call remained silent, allowing him this moment of reflection. "But we figured it out together. Day by day." Kenji traced his finger over Megumi's image in the photo, a rare captured smile from his usually serious nephew. He's the strongest person I've ever known. Not because of his powers, I didn't even know about those until recently. But because of his heart. His determination. He set the photo down carefully. He'll survive this. Whatever dimension he's in, whatever that emperor wants from him, Megumi will find a way through it. I have to believe that. Agent Call nodded. From everything I've heard about him, I believe it too. She gestured to the tray. You should eat while it's warm. I'll check back in a few hours. After she left, Kenji picked at the food without much appetite. The GDA cafeteria meals were adequate but uninspiring institutional food designed for nutrition rather than enjoyment. He found himself missing the simple meals he used to share with Megumi in their apartment, the quiet conversations over coffee in the mornings before they each headed out for the day. Normal moments that he'd taken for granted. Now precious memories he clung to. A soft beeping from the corridor drew his attention. The security system cycling through its hourly check, most likely. The GDA had installed extensive monitoring throughout this section of the facility, particularly around his quarters. For his protection, they claimed. But as the days stretched into weeks with no progress on finding Megumi, Kenji had begun to wonder if he was being protected or contained. A loose end to be managed while the real work happened elsewhere. The beeping stopped abruptly, followed by an unusual silence. Normally, the low hum of the ventilation system provided constant white noise, but even that had ceased. Kenji set down his fork, his military instincts, triggering a warning in his mind. Something was wrong. He moved quietly to the door, pressing his ear against it. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices from the guards who were usually stationed outside. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. But the momentary darkness had been enough to send a chill down his spine. Kenji backed away from the door, looking around for anything he could use as a weapon. The GDA had been careful to remove or secure anything potentially dangerous, leaving him with few options. The best he could manage was a metal tray that might serve as a makeshift shield. A strange green glow began to seep under his door, illuminating the room with an eerie, pulsating light. The air seemed to thicken, becoming harder to breathe as the glow intensified. Then the door simply vanished. Not blown open, not unlocked, just gone, as if it had never existed. In its place stood two men who appeared almost identical, save for one critical difference. One had a portion of his skull missing, exposing a pulsating brain that glowed with the same green energy now filling the room. Mr. Fushiguro, the one with the exposed brain said, his voice unervingly calm. We apologize for the intrusion, but your presence is required elsewhere. Kenji raised the tray defensively. Who are you? Where are the guards? The guards are experiencing a temporary distortion in their perception of reality, the man replied. They currently believe they're still watching an empty corridor. The second man stepped forward, his movements jerky and unpredictable. His eyes held a feverish intensity that made Kenji's blood run cold. Uncle of the devil, he hissed, his voice cracking with emotion. Caretaker of the monster, do you know what you've nurtured in your home? Do you know what abomination you've raised? Kenji's grip tightened on the tray. I don't know who you are or what you're talking about, but if you're referring to my nephew, you can go to hell. The man ogged a high, broken sound that seemed to echo from multiple directions at once. Oh, we've been there, haven't we, brother? We've seen hells across dimensions, and your precious nephew created many of them. Brother, the intact one said sharply. Focus. We have a schedule to maintain. Kenji's military training kicked in. Two assailants, unknown capabilities, confined space. Direct confrontation unlikely to succeed. Need to create distance. Reach the emergency alarm by the bed. He feinted left, then lunged right, attempting to circle around the intruders toward the alarm panel. But before he'd taken 2 steps, the air in front of him rippled, folding in on itself to create a barrier he couldn't see but definitely felt as he slammed into it. Dimensional manipulation, Mad Levy giggled, tapping his exposed brain. Useful, isn't it? The very fabric of reality bends to my will now. Kenji backed away, his mind racing. What do you want from me? From you. The intact one tilted his head. Nothing directly. You're merely a means to an end. Bait, Mad Levy clarified, his grin widening to unnatural proportions. Bait for the devil, the king of curses, the fallen son of heaven. Megumi, Kenji whispered, understanding dawning. This is about Megumi. Sukuna, Mad Levy corrected, spittle flying from his lips. His name is Sukuna, a demon who has devoured worlds, slaughtered innocents, bathed in the blood of children. Your nephew is merely his latest mask, his newest deception. Kenji straightened, his fear giving way to anger. My nephew is a hero. He saved countless lives. Whatever you think you know about him, you're wrong. Am I? Mad Levy stepped closer. I've seen him across 1,000 dimensions, watched him destroy civilizations for sport, consume human flesh for pleasure. I've witnessed atrocities you cannot imagine, all committed by the being you call family. Kenji refused to back away, meeting the madman's gaze steadily. Then you've seen the wrong person. My Megumi isn't capable of those things. Your Megumi, Mad Levy mocked, as if the soul changes with the body it inhabits. The essence remains the same across all dimensions, all incarnations. The devil may wear different faces, but his nature never changes. Scarred Levy stepped forward, placing a restraining hand on his counterpart's arm. We're wasting time. The dimensional window won't remain stable indefinitely. Mad Levy nodded reluctantly, then fixed Kenji with a penetrating stare. You're coming with us, uncle of the devil, and you'll help us draw him out, make him vulnerable. Then we'll end his reign of terror once and for all. Kenji assessed his options rapidly. The door was gone. The alarm was unreachable. The guards were somehow incapacitated. His only hope was to stall, to keep them talking until anyone realized something was wrong. And if I refuse? He asked, playing for time. Mad Levy's smile returned, more terrible than before. You misunderstand. This isn't a request. The green energy surrounding them intensified, coalescing into a swirling vortex that engulfed all three men. Kenji felt a sickening sensation of falling without moving, of being stretched and compressed simultaneously. His last thought before consciousness fled was of Megumi and a desperate hope that whatever these madmen planned, his nephew would be too far away, too safely ensconced in another dimension, to be drawn into their trap. When Kenji regained awareness, he found himself in what appeared to be a laboratory of some kind. Sleek, advanced equipment lined the walls, much of it unlike anything he'd seen before. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something metallic and vaguely organic that made his stomach turn. He was secured to a chair, his wrists and ankles bound with restraints that seemed to phase in and out of solidity when he looked at them directly. Dimensional shackles, Mad Levy explained, noticing his gaze. They exist partially in this reality, partially in another. Impossible to break unless you can manipulate the fabric of reality itself. Kenji tested them anyway, his military training demanding he assess all possible escape routes. The restraints held firm, becoming more solid the harder he pulled against them. Where am I? He demanded, looking around the laboratory. What is this place? A nexus point, Scarred Levy answered, adjusting some equipment nearby. A location where dimensional barriers are naturally thinner. It allows us to conduct our work with minimal energy expenditure. Your work, Kenji repeated. And what exactly is that? Mad Levy circled him like a predator, his exposed brain pulsing with excitement. Justice, he declared. Retribution. Prevention. We're going to stop Sukuna before he can consume this world as he has so many others. By kidnapping an innocent man? Kenji challenged. That's your idea of justice? Innocent. Mad Levy stopped his pacing, leaning in until his face was inches from Kenji's. You harbored the devil himself, nurtured him, loved him. Do you know what that makes you? Complicit. An accessory to every atrocity he will commit. His voice dropped to a whisper. You should have killed him the moment his parents died, strangled him in his sleep, saved countless worlds from his hunger. With shocking speed, Mad Levy's hands shot out, wrapping around Kenji's throat and squeezing with manic strength. Like this, he hissed, his eyes wild. One simple act of mercy for the universe. One child's life to save billions. Kenji couldn't breathe, couldn't speak as the madman's fingers dug into his windpipe. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision as oxygen deprivation set in. Suddenly, the pressure released. Scarred Levy had pulled his counterpart away, restraining him with surprising strength. Enough! Scarred Levy snapped. He's no use to us dead. Control yourself. Mad Levy struggled briefly, then went limp in his counterpart's grip. Of course, he muttered. Of course, the plan. We must follow the plan. Kenji coughed violently, drawing precious air back into his lungs. When he could speak again, his voice was raspy but determined. You're insane. Both of you. My nephew isn't this devil you're describing. Your nephew? Mad Levy spat, having regained some composure. Let me educate you about your precious Megumi. Shall I? About what he really is. What followed was a tirade of such horrific detail that Kenji found himself wishing for the strangling to resume. Mad Levy described atrocities across multiple dimensions, all allegedly committed by Sukuna: cannibalism, torture, mass murder, the destruction of entire civilizations for mere amusement. He is the fallen son of heaven, Mad Levy ranted, pacing frantically. Cast out for his rebellion, his refusal to guide humanity as intended. Instead, he chose to subjugate them, to feed on them, to break them for his pleasure. He whirled on Kenji, eyes burning with hatred. He has consumed the flesh of children while their parents watched. He has violated women in ways that left them begging for death. He has burned cities to ash simply to watch the flames dance. This is the creature you call nephew. This is the monster you love. Throughout the diatribe, Kenji remained silent, his expression growing more resolved rather than more frightened. When Mad Levy finally paused for breath, Kenji spoke with quiet certainty. I understand now. You're talking about other versions of Megumi, other incarnations from other dimensions. They are all the same soul. Mad Levy screamed, spittle flying. Different bodies, different times, different dimensions, it doesn't matter. The essence remains unchanged. Kenji nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. This unexpected agreement seemed to throw Mad Levy off balance. What? Maybe it is the same soul, Kenji continued. Maybe my Megumi does carry within him the capacity for all those horrors you described. Maybe in other lives, other dimensions, he has committed unspeakable acts. He looked directly into Mad Levy's fevered eyes. But my Megumi, the one I raised, the one I love, he chose differently. He chose to protect rather than destroy, to save rather than consume. And that choice matters more than any inherent nature you claim he possesses. Mad Levy's face contorted with rage. You fool! You sentimental, blind fool! He has deceived you, as he has deceived so many others before. His apparent heroism is merely a mask, a strategy to position himself for greater destruction later. No, Kenji said simply. I know my nephew, not just his actions but his heart. Even if what you say about his soul is true, even if he is this Sukuna reborn or reincarnated, he has chosen a different path in this life. And I am proud of him for that choice. He straightened in his chair, as much as the restraints would allow. So do your worst. Kill me if that's your plan. But know this, I will never turn against my nephew. I will never give you what you want. I will die loving him exactly as I have always loved him, completely, without reservation, and with absolute faith in the goodness of his heart. Mad Levy stared at him in disbelief, then threw back his head and roared with laughter, a sound so unhinged it chilled even the scarred one. Kill you? He gasped between fits of manic laughter. Oh no, no, no. That would be far too simple, too merciful. His laughter abruptly ceased, replaced by a cold, calculating smile that chilled Kenji to his core. We have much more elaborate plans for you, uncle of the devil. Plans that will draw Sukuna out, make him vulnerable in ways he has never been before. Kenji's military instincts screamed danger, but he kept his expression neutral. Whatever you're planning, it won't work. Megumi is in another dimension. He can't reach me, and I can't reach him. Dimensions, Mad Levy said dismissively. Barriers, walls. These are merely constructs, obstacles to be overcome with sufficient knowledge and power. He tapped his exposed, glowing brain. And we have both in abundance. Realizing what these madmen might be capable of, what they might intend to use him for, Kenji made a desperate decision. With a sudden jerk of his head, he bit down hard on his own tongue, trying to sever it to end his life before he could be used as bait or leverage against his nephew. The taste of blood filled his mouth, but before he could complete the act, Scarred Levy was there, forcing his jaws apart, inserting some kind of device that prevented him from closing his mouth fully. Former military, Scarred Levy observed clinically. Trained to resist interrogation, including suicide protocols. Impressive, but ultimately futile. He turned to a communication panel on the wall. Send in the specialists. Our subject is prepared. Mad Levy leaned in close, his breath hot against Kenji's ear. You think death would save you? Would save him? No, no, no. What we have planned transcends such simple concepts as life and death. The laboratory door slid open, admitting 3 figures in white coats. Their features were obscured by strange masks that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly, but their clinical efficiency was unmistakable as they began preparing equipment around Kenji's chair. What we're about to do has never been attempted, Scarred Levy explained, his tone almost apologetic. The process will be uncomfortable, but necessary. One of the specialists approached with a device that resembled a crown of thorns, each point tipped with a needle that glowed with the same green energy that permeated the laboratory. As the crown was lowered toward his head, Kenji made one last, desperate attempt to reason with his captors. Please, he gasped around the device in his mouth. My nephew is innocent. Whatever this Sukuna did in other worlds, my Megumi doesn't deserve this. Mad Levy's face softened into an expression almost like pity. No one is innocent, he said quietly. Least of all the fallen son of heaven. The crown touched Kenji's forehead, and the needles pierced his skin. Pain unlike anything he had ever experienced coursed through his body, setting every nerve ending afire simultaneously. His scream was muffled by the device in his mouth, but in his mind, it echoed with perfect clarity a single name, a plea, a warning, Megumi. As consciousness began to slip away beneath the onslaught of agony, Kenji's last coherent thought was a desperate hope that somehow, across the dimensional void, his nephew would sense the danger and stay far, far away. But in his heart, he knew better. If Megumi could hear his pain, could sense his peril, nothing in any universe would stop him from coming. Because that was who his nephew was, not a devil, not a monster, but a protector. A hero. His son. Kenji's roars of agony echoed through the laboratory, bouncing off the sterile walls and merging with the humming of the equipment, and unknown to Kenji, a hint of dark magic. The sound seemed to transcend normal acoustics, vibrating at frequencies that distorted the very air. Mad Levy watched with fevered satisfaction, his exposed brain pulsing in rhythm with Kenji's screams. Yes, he whispered. Call to it. Let it hear you across the void. The specialists continued their work with mechanical precision, adjusting dials and monitoring readings as the dimensional beacon grew stronger. And somewhere, across the barriers between worlds, something stirred in response. Acceptable, the imperial gardens stretched for miles with silver-leaf trees with trunks of deep purple swaying gently in the breeze. Sukuna sat alone at the water's edge, his reflection rippling in the crystal-clear current. The river with its waters a shade of blue so intense it seemed brought immense peace to look at directly. But Sukuna's thoughts were far from appreciating the beauty around him. His mind circled relentlessly around the violation of the imperial tomb, the theft of his previous self's corpse. Who would take it? He murmured, picking up a smooth stone and turning it over in his fingers. And more importantly, why? the Emperor had been devastated, his rage giving way to a cold, focused determination that was somehow more frightening than his initial fury. The entire empire had been mobilized to search for the culprits, but so far, nothing had been found. Sukuna's thoughts kept returning to a name, a face from the dimensional merger Angstrom Levy. The man the Emperor told him was contacted apparently by another version of himself, one who had seemed to recognize him, to fear him with an intensity that went beyond rational concern. "He fears and hates me," Sukuna muttered, as if establishing a fact to reason from henceforth. "But why would he target me, my corpse, specifically?" Sukuna wondered aloud, skipping the stone across the impossible river. It bounced 7 times before disappearing beneath the surface. What could he possibly gain from it? Is it simply blind hatred wishing to defile my previous self? The questions had no answers, only leading to more questions, more possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Ritual components? Genetic material? Some form of dimensional leverage? Suddenly, a sharp pain lanced through Sukuna's chest, so intense and unexpected that he gasped aloud. His hand flew to his heart, pressing against it as if to contain something trying to escape. "What is this?" he hissed through clenched teeth, doubling over as the sensation intensified. It wasn't a physical wound. His enhanced body would have already begun healing such an injury. This was something else, something deeper, more fundamental. A constriction around his heart, a primal fear that had no obvious source. Sukuna looked down at his chest in confusion, his palm pressed flat against it. The pain had no visible cause, no external trigger. It simply existed, a phantom agony that seemed to reach across dimensions. "A connection," he whispered, realization dawning. "Someone is pulling on me, calling to me. But who? Who in this universe or any other had such a profound connection to his soul that they could reach him across the void?" The answer came in a whisper so faint he almost missed it, a name that seemed to form directly in his mind rather than reaching his ears. Kenji. In the merged world, the GDA facility was in chaos. Alarms blared, personnel rushed through corridors, and at the center of it all, Mark Grayson stood facing both versions of Cecil Stedman, his expression a mask of barely contained fury. "I warned you," Mark said, his voice dangerously quiet despite the chaos around them. "I told you Kenji needed 24/7 protection. I told you those lunatics would target him to get to Megumi." Behind him, Nolan and Eve stood in grim solidarity, their presence adding weight to Mark's accusation. Original Cecil winced, his usual composure cracking under the weight of Mark's justified anger. "I understand your frustration, Mark, but you couldn't have maintained constant vigilance over Mr. Fushiguro indefinitely." "Why not?" Mark demanded, his fists clenching at his sides. "The crime rate has dropped significantly since the merger announcement. Villains are laying low, waiting to see what happens with the Viltrumites. All I needed to do was keep Kenji at the facility where I train anyway. The world needed to see you," alternate Cecil countered, though his voice lacked conviction. People needed reassurance that their heroes were still protecting them, especially with Sukuna gone. "And look where that got us." Mark shot back, gesturing to the empty room where Kenji had been kept. "A good man kidnapped by dimensional psychopaths who have some vendetta against his nephew." Mark turned away, struggling to contain his emotions. Over the past weeks, he had spent considerable time with Kenji, trying to understand more about the alternate version of himself and the life he had shared with Megumi. What he had found was a kind, patient man who had raised Megumi alone after his parents' deaths, who had supported him through difficulties Mark could only imagine. In Kenji, Mark had found something unexpected, a connection to a life he might have lived, a friendship he might have valued above all others. And now, that connection was in danger because he hadn't been there to protect him. "I should have been here," Mark said quietly, more to himself than the others. Nolan stepped forward, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "This isn't your fault, Mark." His gaze shifted to the Cecils, hardening slightly. "The responsibility lies elsewhere." Though their relationship was still evolving, still complicated by the knowledge that this Nolan was not his father, Mark found comfort in the gesture. Nolan had also formed a tentative friendship with Kenji during his time at the GDA, the two men beginning to know each other during their time here, both before never having had the time to meet each other, but connected through their sons. "There may be a way to save him," Original Cecil said suddenly. Alternate Cecil's head snapped toward his counterpart. "You can't be serious. The risks are acceptable," Original Cecil interrupted firmly. "Unlike you, I understand how bonds between people can truly shape someone's path. I've seen Nolan betray Earth in one timeline and choose to protect it in another, all because of his love for his family." He adjusted his glasses, a gesture that seemed to center him. "I've witnessed firsthand what a being of Sukuna's power level would be like if he turned against us. If Kenji's safety is what keeps him on our side, then Kenji must be saved, no matter the risk." Mark barely registered Cecil's reasoning, focusing only on the possibility of rescue. "What way? How can we reach him?" Cecil activated a holographic display, showing a complex device that resembled a circular archway filled with intricate technological components. "A dimensional portal opener," he explained. "Still in prototype phase, but functional. The energy signature from wherever Kenji was taken is massive, easy to lock onto. We should be able to create a direct portal to his location." "Should?" Eve questioned, stepping forward. "The technology is experimental," Cecil admitted. "There are risks. The portal could collapse while you're inside, trapping you. Or it might not open at the correct coordinates." "It doesn't matter," Mark said immediately. "I'm going. I'm coming with you," Eve declared, moving to stand beside him. Mark turned to her, his expression softening but remaining resolute. "No, you're not." "Mark," she began to protest. "I need to focus completely on getting Kenji back," Mark explained, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Eve, and I know how capable you are. But right now, I can't risk being distracted by worrying about your safety too." Eve wanted to argue further, but something in Mark's expression stopped her. This wasn't about doubting her abilities, it was about his own emotional state, his need to concentrate solely on the mission. "I'll go with him," Nolan volunteered, stepping forward. Alternate Cecil immediately objected. "We can't leave Earth defenseless. You and Mark are our two strongest defenders. If the Viltrumites choose this moment to attack, we have plenty of capable defenders," Nolan countered, raising an eyebrow. "And you should understand the stakes better than anyone. You've heard what the demon Penemu said about Megumi, that he's some kind of messiah, a potential savior or destroyer." His voice lowered, taking on a gravity that silenced everyone in the room. "Do you really want to risk him choosing the latter? Becoming a destroyer through grief over losing the closest thing he has to a father?" Alternate Cecil held Nolan's gaze for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Activate the prototype," he ordered a nearby technician. "Full power." The circular device hummed to life, energy building within its frame until a swirling vortex of blue-green light filled the center. The portal stabilized, showing a glimpse of a sterile laboratory beyond. "Remember," Original Cecil warned, "this is a rescue mission only. Get Kenji and get out. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary." Mark and Nolan exchanged a glance, both knowing that such restraint might not be possible given what they might find. "We'll bring him back," Mark promised Eve, squeezing her hand one last time before stepping toward the portal. "Be careful," she whispered, reluctantly letting go. Without further hesitation, Mark and Nolan stepped through the dimensional gateway, disappearing into the swirling energy. The laboratory on the other side was a nightmare of clinical efficiency and arcane technology. Equipment that seemed to blend advanced science with something darker, more mystical, lined the walls. In the center of the room, strapped to a chair with restraints that phased in and out of visibility, was Kenji. A crown of thorns sat upon his head, each needle-like protrusion glowing with sickly green energy that pulsed in rhythm with his agonized screams. Blood trickled from where the needles pierced his skin, mingling with sweat that soaked his hospital gown. Two versions of Angstrom Levy stood nearby, one with an exposed, pulsating brain, the other with a more intact skull but the same manic gleam in his eyes. Around them, white-coated figures with shifting, Indistinct faces monitored equipment and adjusted dials. Increase the amplitude, Mad Levy ordered, his voice high with excitement. The beacon must be stronger to reach across the plains. The scene froze as Mark and Nolan materialized in the laboratory, the portal closing behind them with a sound like tearing fabric. What Mad Levy began, his eyes widening in shock. Invincible! Scarred Levy shrieked, his exposed brain pulsing faster with rage and fear. How did you find us? How did you breach our defenses? Mark didn't waste time with explanations. Let him go, he demanded, his voice cold with fury as he took in Kenji's tortured state. You don't understand what you're interfering with, Mad Levy shouted, spittle flying from his lips. This is necessary. The beacon must reach the purifier. He must be called for the end of the devil. I don't care about your insane vendetta, Mark replied, taking a step forward. That man is innocent. Innocent. Mad Levy's laugh was brittle, unhinged. He raised the king of curses, nurtured him, loved him. His very existence enables the destroyer of worlds. Nolan moved with superhuman speed, targeting the white-coated figures first. They offered no resistance as he dispatched them with clinical efficiency, their bodies crumpling to the floor before they could react. No! Scarred Levy shouted as Nolan reached Kenji, carefully examining the crown device. Don't touch that! Mad Levy screamed. You have no idea what you're doing. The dimensional beacon is delicate if disrupted improperly. It could tear his mind apart. I don't care about your beacon, Mark growled, advancing on Mad Levy with murderous intent. All I care about is getting Kenji home safely. Nolan, who had the most experience with advanced technology among them, carefully studied the connections between the crown and the monitoring equipment. The neural interfaces are complex, but the power source is simple, he observed. If I disconnect it in sequence. His fingers moved with surprising delicacy for such a powerful being, detaching connections one by one in a specific order. The green glow dimmed gradually until, with a final click, the crown went dark. No! Mad Levy roared, lunging forward only to be intercepted by Mark. With cold precision, Mark grabbed Mad Levy's arm and twisted, the sound of breaking bone followed by a wet tearing as the limbs separated from the body. Mad Levy screamed, collapsing to his knees as blood poured from the wound. Mark advanced further towards Mad Levy, his hand poised to strike directly through the man's chest. This ends now, he stated, his voice devoid of mercy. You don't understand. Mad Levy gasped, backing away. He's coming. The devil is coming. And when he arrives, he'll devour this world as he has so many others. I don't care. Mark enunciated each word clearly, his hand inches from Mad Levy's heart having seen the disaster these two monsters nearly bring. How they nearly ended the lives of trillions, nearly destroying the universe. Before the fatal blow could land, Scarred Levy activated some kind of device. Green energy enveloped both Levies, and they vanished with a sound like shattering glass, teleporting away. Mark cursed, then turned his attention back to Kenji. Nolan had removed the crown completely and was gently lifting the unconscious man from the chair. Is he? Mark couldn't finish the question. Alive, Nolan confirmed, checking Kenji's pulse. But badly injured. We need to get him back immediately. The portal behind them flickered, beginning to destabilize. Without another word, both men moved toward it, Nolan carrying Kenji's limp form with careful strength. They stepped through just as the dimensional gateway began to collapse, emerging back into the GDA facility amid flashing warning lights and blaring alarms. Medical team now? Original Cecil barked into a communicator as the portal winked out of existence behind them. Mark knelt beside Kenji as Nolan gently laid him on the floor, medical personnel already rushing forward with equipment. Kenji? Mark called, his voice breaking slightly as he took in the older man's pale, blood-streaked face. Kenji, can you hear me? You're safe now. You're home. But Kenji remained unresponsive, his breathing shallow, his pulse weak but present. Whatever the Levies had done to him had taken a terrible toll. As the medical team worked to stabilize him, Mark stood back, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. The rescue had been successful, but the cost remained to be seen. And somewhere out there, two versions of Angstrom Levy were still plotting, still obsessed with drawing Sukuna out, still convinced he represented some existential threat. What troubled Mark most wasn't their escape, but what they said. Not about Megumi. Mark refused to believe the guy, how little he may know him, could be the monster they described, but about what they meant with reaching across the plains. If they could kidnap Kenji from under the GDA's nose, if they could create a beacon designed to call whatever they were calling, what else might they be capable of? And besides all this, if Sukuna did somehow sense Kenji's peril, something he himself for some reason instinctively was drawn to him being able to, if he did find a way to breach the Emperor's dimension to return, what would he do when he discovered what had been done to the man he considered family? Mark didn't want to contemplate the answer. For now, all that mattered was that Kenji was back, alive if not well. The rest would have to wait. But as he watched the medical team work, a cold certainty settled in his gut. This was far from over. The Levies would try again. And next time, he would be ready. Just wanted to tell you guys this, so this isn't a chapter, but a small announcement. I think I have enough leeway for another, since I do drop like 3 chapters a day at least. Still, apologies if it is annoying. First things first, for anyone who likes this fanfic, there is a fanfic called As Gojo in Invincible by Kazuma_Trash. I have read a decent amount of chapters and find it promising. So first wish to tell you guys that. Second, and this is the highlight of this announcement, the Mark self-insert fanfic. Yeah. I've been planning it and all and just feel that it currently will be too much like this FIC and Emperor Mark, since the plans I have for Mark would make him too OP, which would mean it will be too short, or I got to go again with the counterpart thing, which I don't want to, since I don't like repeating plot lines, it's boring. So, I have been having a, to my knowledge, original idea, as original as it can get in the internet, since probably something similar is already out there, but a fanfic that is for one a DC one, but this one is very slice of life focused with a main character, Samuel, who basically is a reincarnator there, a 20-year-old orphan who adopted some of the kids who were like his sibling in the orphanage. I think to make it interesting, I'll have a couple anime main characters be reincarnators after moments in their story where things ended up well, but this time didn't. Like Mark being one, but he died against Nolan. I simply want to write a older brother/father story since I haven't done so, and to make things interesting and fun, I'm going to have him have powers, but there are a couple options, so if you are interested in reading this FIC, to choose one of these. 1. Archangel powers from Supernatural, basically being an archangel that can virtually do anything and remake the universe, but he would need to adjust to his powers. 2. A Scion, to be specific, the legendary Super Scion 3. The Shadow Monarch, the one I'm leaning most towards. Also, do give suggestions to who you want the siblings/adopted children to be who remember their past lives. I want there to at first be max 4, Mark is already 1, there are 3 slots open. So yeah, I hope to hear from you guys and I hope to see you all later. Bye. Discontent within the depths of Sukuna's consciousness, far removed from the Imperial Palace and its intrigues, existed a realm unlike any other. The inner domain, it reflected the unique nature of its master, a space where the 10 Shikigami of the 10 Shadows technique resided when not summoned to the physical world. The domain resembled an ancient Japanese temple complex, its architecture reminiscent of the Heian era when Sukuna first walked the earth. Stone pathways wound between traditional buildings, gardens of impossible beauty bloomed with flowers that could not exist in the physical realm, and at the center stood a magnificent structure that dwarfed all others, Maharaga's shrine. Today, the normally peaceful domain hummed with discontent. 9 of the 10 Shikigami had gathered in what they called the Commons, a circular courtyard surrounded by cherry trees in perpetual bloom, to discuss a matter of growing importance to them all. Divine Dog White paced restlessly, his pristine fur bristling with agitation. Unlike his black counterpart, who tended toward stoic silence, White was vocal, expressive, and currently, extremely annoyed. "It's happened again," he growled, tail lashing behind him. Master summoned Maharaga for poker. Not battle, not training poker. Meanwhile, when was the last time any of us were called forth except for combat? Divine Dog Black, lying with his massive head on his paws, opened one eye. "The master summons whom he wishes," he rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. "It is not our place to question." "Oh, please!" White snapped, rounding on his counterpart. Don't pretend you're not just as irritated as the rest of us. I've seen you watching when Maharaga gets summoned. Your tail does that little twitch it always does when you're upset. Black's ears flattened slightly. My tail does no such thing. From atop a nearby rock, Nu made a sound suspiciously like a snicker. The Thunderbird Shikigami stretched his wings, electricity crackling between his feathers. Black's right about one thing the master does as he pleases. But White's not wrong either. The favoritism has gotten noticeable. Noticeable? Great Serpent hissed from where she was coiled around a tree branch, her massive body draped through the cherry blossoms. Her voice was silky, cultured, with the subtle condescension of ancient nobility. It's beyond noticeable. It's flagrant. Maharaga this, Maharaga that. Oh Maharaga, let's play cards. Oh Maharaga, let's discuss philosophy. Oh Maharaga, please stand menacingly beside me while I negotiate with the Emperor. To be fair, interjected Max Elephant, his voice surprisingly gentle for his enormous size. Maharaga is the divine general. He's always been the strongest among us. Strength isn't everything, Piercing Ox snorted, pawing the ground impatiently. The massive bovine Shikigami was all corded muscle and barely contained aggression, his horns gleaming dangerously in the ethereal light. I could pierce through a Viltrumite's chest if given the chance. But has the master summoned me since arriving in this dimension? Not once. At least you dogs have been summoned in battle before, Morn Tiger grumbled from where she lounged in a patch of sunlight. Her striped coat rippled as she stretched, claws extending and retracting rhythmically. I haven't been called in so long. I'm starting to think the master has forgotten I exist. Try being me, sighed Round Deer, his gentle eyes downcast. The elegant Shikigami's antlers glowed softly as he spoke. My abilities are perfect for scouting unfamiliar terrain, yet who does he send? Maharaga, as if subtlety means nothing. Ribbit. All heads turned toward Toad, who sat at the edge of a small pond, his massive form creating ripples in the water with each breath. Despite his intimidating size, Toad's personality was surprisingly sensitive. What Toad means, translated White with the ease of long familiarity, is that he feels particularly overlooked because his poison capabilities would be extremely useful against these Viltrumites the master is so concerned about. Rib-bit, Toad confirmed sadly, his throat sac inflating slightly. A flurry of movement caught everyone's attention as hundreds of small white rabbits suddenly materialized, hopping around the courtyard before coalescing into a humanoid shape. Rabbit Escape, the most mercurial of the Shikigami, rarely maintained a single form for long. We're all missing the point, Rabbit Escape said, her voice a chorus of hundreds speaking in unison. The real issue isn't just that Maharaga gets summoned more, it's that he gets to interact with the master. On a personal level. When was the last time any of us had a conversation with Sukuna-sama? Not just received orders, but actually spoke with him. A contemplative silence fell over the gathering. It was true their interactions with their master had always been primarily functional. Summoned for battle, dismissed when no longer needed. Maharaga alone seemed to enjoy a relationship that transcended mere utility. It wasn't always this way, Great Serpent observed, her tongue flicking thoughtfully. In his previous life, before the supposed battle with the 6 eyes, the master would sometimes sit beneath my tree and read for hours. I felt appreciated. He used to race with me, White added, his earlier anger fading to melancholy. Back when he arrived in this world and he was still learning to control his cursed energy. He said my speed helped him benchmark his progress. He composed poetry while riding on my back once when he was with Lady Eve, Round Deer reminisced. Something about the rhythm of my movement inspiring his words. Ribbit, Toad croaked softly. Yes, White translated. Toad remembers when the master would swim with him in the lakes of Japan after he gained his smart atoms. Said the poison immunity training was essential, but we all knew he simply enjoyed the water. Nu rustled his wings, electricity dancing between his feathers. He would fly with me during storms. Said there was no purer joy than racing lightning. This new world has changed him, Morn Tiger observed, rolling onto her back. Or perhaps it's this regression situation. He seems even softer, even more inclined toward connection. Just not with us. Only with Maharaga. Piercing Ox grunted bitterly. The precious divine general. Speaking of whom, Great Serpent hissed, her head rising higher. Here comes the favorite now. All 9 Shikigami turned as Maharaga entered the courtyard. The divine general moved with impossible grace for his massive size, each step precise and deliberate. The wheel above his head rotated slowly, catching the ethereal light in hypnotic patterns. Brothers, sisters, Maharaga greeted them, his voice resonating with power. Unlike the other Shikigami who communicated through sounds interpreted within Sukuna's mind, Maharaga's words formed directly in the consciousness of those he addressed. You seem agitated. Agitated. Piercing Ox snorted, pawing the ground more aggressively. Why would we be agitated? Just because the master summons you for card games while the rest of us gather dust in here. Maharagas will spun slightly faster, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow for the faceless Shikigami. Ah, this again. Yes, this again. White growled, hackles rising. Do you have any idea how it feels to be overlooked? To be forgotten? I was not summoned for entertainment, Maharaga clarified, his tone neutral. The master was using the game to evaluate the emperor's psychological state. My presence served a strategic purpose. Of course it did. Great Serpent's voice dripped with sarcasm. Everything you do is essential, isn't it? The rest of us couldn't possibly contribute to such important matters as… What was it? Poker. Maharagas will rotated a full turn before stopping abruptly, a gesture the others had learned to interpret as a sigh. Your frustration is understandable but misplaced. I do not choose when I am summoned. That is the master's prerogative. But you don't exactly discourage it, do you? New challenged, electricity crackling more intensely around him. Always so eager to serve, to be by his side. The perfect Shikigami. Makes the rest of us look bad by comparison. I fulfill my purpose, Maharaga replied simply, as do all of you when called upon. When called upon, Morn Tiger repeated with a bitter laugh. That's the entire point. We're rarely called upon anymore. Not since you became his favorite. Maharaga remained silent for a moment, his will spinning thoughtfully. When he finally responded, his tone held a note of what might have been compassion unexpected from the normally impassive divine general. Perhaps, he suggested, you should consider speaking directly to the master about your concerns. A chorus of disbelieving responses greeted this suggestion. Speak to the master? White barked incredulously. About our feelings? Great Serpent added, her voice rising an octave. Ribbit! Toad exclaimed, so shocked that he nearly fell into the pond. The master is not unapproachable, Maharaga pointed out, particularly in this incarnation. He has evolved in ways you may not fully appreciate from your limited interactions. Easy for you to say, Rabbit Escape countered, briefly dissolving into hundreds of rabbits before reforming. You actually get to talk with him regularly. The rest of us just get orders and dismissals. Maharagas will spun faster. A sign of growing impatience, another rare display of emotion from the normally stoic Shikigami. The master values each of you for your unique abilities. If you feel underutilized, perhaps the fault lies not in his choices but in your failure to demonstrate your potential utility in this new environment. Are you suggesting we're not trying hard enough? Piercing Ox demanded, lowering his horns threateningly. I am suggesting, Maharaga replied evenly, that adaptation is necessary. This world is not like our previous one. The threats are different. The master's needs are different. Have any of you considered how your abilities might be applied to these new circumstances? The question hung in the air, met with uncomfortable silence. That's what I thought, Maharaga continued. You complain of being overlooked, yet make no effort to prove your relevance. The master doesn't summon you for idle companionship because you've never shown interest in anything beyond your combat functions. That's not fair, White protested, though with less conviction than before. We've never been given the chance. Haven't you? Maharaga challenged. Each time you're summoned, each moment in the physical world, is an opportunity. Yet you focus solely on the task at hand, never engaging beyond what is strictly required. Even when during his hero days in this new life you had the most opportunity, especially when he got with Lady Eve, during the first months of their relationship. You had then even more opportunity than me. Is it any wonder the master sees you as tools rather than companions? The accusation stung, particularly because none of them could entirely refute it. They had always defined themselves by their combat roles, their specific functions within the 10 Shadows technique. The idea of engaging with their master on a more personal level was foreign, almost transgressive. The master has changed, Maharaga continued, his tone softening slightly. This new life, this new form, they've altered him in ways both subtle and profound. He seeks connection now, something he would have scorned in his original incarnation. Yet his nature remains fundamentally the same. He will not reach out. He will not ask. If you wish for a different relationship with him, you must take the initiative. And how exactly are we supposed to do that? Great Serpent demanded, though her usual condescension had given way to genuine curiosity. We can't simply manifest and demand conversation. Can't you? Maharagas will spun in what might have been amusement. The barriers between this domain and the master's consciousness are more permeable than you realize. He hears more than you think. As if on cue, the entire domain trembled slightly, a pulse of awareness from its creator rippling through the ethereal space. The Shikigami froze, suddenly uncertain whether their conversation had been more public than intended. Well, this is awkward, Nu muttered, electricity dimming around his feathers. Has he been listening this whole time? White whispered, ears flattening against his head. Not actively, Maharaga assured them. But on some level, he is always aware of this domain and what transpires within it. Your discontent has not gone entirely unnoticed. Another tremor ran through the domain, stronger this time. The cherry blossoms above them began to fall more rapidly, swirling in patterns that suggested deliberate manipulation rather than natural movement. I believe, Maharaga observed, his will spinning faster. The master may be considering joining us. Panic erupted among the Shikigami. Great Serpent nearly fell from her branch. White began running in circles. Toad inflated his throat sac to twice its normal size before letting out a distressed ribbit that echoed through the courtyard. He can't come here, Morn Tiger exclaimed, leaping to her feet. Not while we're discussing our grievances about him. Actually, Maharaga corrected. This domain exists within him. He is, in a very real sense, always here. The question is merely one of attention and manifestation. That doesn't help, Piercing Ox bellowed, now pacing nervously. What do we do? What do we say? Perhaps, Round Deer suggested quietly, speaking up for the first time in a while, we should simply be honest. If the master truly has changed as Maharaga suggests, maybe he will understand our feelings. Before anyone could respond to this radical proposal, the air at the center of the courtyard began to shimmer. The cherry blossoms swirled more intensely, forming a vortex of pink and white that gradually coalesced into a humanoid shape. Sukuna materialized before them, not in his physical form but as a manifestation of his consciousness within the domain. He appeared as he currently existed in the physical world, the body of Megumi Fushiguro, but with the unmistakable presence of the King of Curses. For a long moment, silence reigned in the courtyard. The Shikigami, caught between respect, fear, and embarrassment, waited for their master to speak first. Sukuna's gaze swept over the assembled Shikigami, his expression unreadable. Then, to their collective shock, his lips curved into what might have been a smile. Well, he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries despite his youthful appearance. This is unexpected, a Shikigami council meeting, and I wasn't invited. White, always the most impulsive, stepped forward before the others could stop him. Master, we didn't mean any disrespect. We were just complaining about my preferential treatment of Maharaga. Sukuna finished for him, crossing his arms. Yes, I gathered that much. Another uncomfortable silence fell. The Shikigami exchanged nervous glances, uncertain how to proceed. Even Maharaga's will had slowed to an almost imperceptible rotation, a sign of unusual caution from the divine general. To everyone's surprise, it was Toad who broke the silence. "Ribbit," he croaked, his voice surprisingly firm. White, too shocked to translate, simply stared at his amphibian companion. "He says," Sukuna translated, raising an eyebrow, "that you all deserve better from me, that I've taken you for granted, that I've forgotten what each of you contributed to my growth and power." Toad nodded emphatically, his throat sac inflating with conviction. "Is that how all of you feel?" Sukuna asked, his gaze moving from one Shikigami to the next. Slowly, reluctantly, they nodded. Even Black, usually the most reserved, gave a single, dignified dip of his massive head. Sukuna was silent for a long moment, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. Finally, he sighed, a surprisingly human gesture from the ancient being. "You're right," he admitted, shocking them all into stunned silence. "I have been selective in my attention. Old habits, I suppose. In my original incarnation, I viewed you all as weapons, tools to be used and set aside. Even in this life, with my more balanced approach to the 10 shadows, I have maintained something of that distance." He moved to a stone bench beneath one of the cherry trees and sat, a gesture so casual and human that several of the Shikigami exchanged confused glances. "This new existence has been educational," Sukuna continued, gesturing for them to gather closer. "I find myself experiencing connections, emotions, relationships in ways I would have scorned in my first life. Yet I have extended this evolution only to the physical world, not to my relationship with you who have been with me longest." Great Serpent, emboldened by his unexpected receptiveness, uncoiled slightly from her branch. "We do not seek to criticize, Master. We merely wish to serve you as fully as possible." "To be seen," Morn Tiger added quietly. "To be known. To be valued for more than our combat utility," Round Deer finished. Sukuna nodded slowly. "Reasonable desires. Ones I should have recognized sooner." He turned to Maharaga, who stood slightly apart from the others. "You knew this conversation was overdue, didn't you?" Maharaga's will spun once in acknowledgement. "I observed their discontent growing. It seemed inefficient to allow it to continue unchecked." "Efficient as always," Sukuna noted with what might have been dry humor. "Though perhaps next time, bring such matters to my attention directly rather than allowing them to fester." "As you wish, Master," Maharaga replied, his will spinning slightly faster in what the others had learned to recognize as mild embarrassment. Sukuna returned his attention to the rest of the Shikigami. "This situation requires correction. Each of you possesses unique abilities that may prove valuable in our current circumstances beyond mere combat applications." He rose, moving to stand before Nu. "Your control over electricity could be instrumental in understanding and potentially disrupting Viltrumite technology. I have been remiss in not exploring this possibility." Nu's feathers rustled with surprised pleasure, electricity dancing more vibrantly around him. Sukuna moved to Great Serpent next. "Your wisdom and patience, accumulated over centuries, make you an ideal advisor for diplomatic matters, something I find myself increasingly entangled in." Great Serpent's tongue flicked out in what might have been a gesture of pleased embarrassment. "Toad," Sukuna continued, "your poison capabilities could indeed prove effective against Viltrumites, whose healing abilities might be vulnerable to the right toxins. We should experiment with this." "Ribbit!" Toad exclaimed happily, bouncing slightly in place. One by one, Sukuna addressed each Shikigami, acknowledging their unique potential contributions to the challenges he currently faced. With each recognition, the atmosphere in the domain lightened, the earlier tension dissolving into something approaching excitement. "I propose a new arrangement," Sukuna announced when he had finished. "A rotation of sorts. Each of you will have opportunities for manifestation beyond combat situations. opportunities to observe, to learn, to contribute in ways we have not previously explored. Really? White asked, his tail beginning to wag despite his efforts to maintain dignity. You mean we'll get to come out just to be with you? Within reason, Sukuna qualified, though his tone remained unexpectedly indulgent. There are practical limitations to consider. But yes, I see now that I have underutilized your potential. A mistake I intend to correct. The Shikigami exchanged glances of cautious optimism, hardly daring to believe this unexpected turn of events. Beginning tomorrow, Sukuna continued, I will implement this new approach. White and Black will accompany me to my meeting with the Imperial advisors. Your ability to detect deception will be valuable. The divine dogs straightened, their posture radiating pride. Nu will join me in the Imperial Technology Center. Great Serpent will observe the diplomatic corps. The rest of you will have your assignments in due course. He turned to Maharaga, who had remained silent throughout these pronouncements. And you, Divine General, will continue your current duties, but perhaps with less exclusivity. Maharagas will spun once in acknowledgement. As you wish, Master. Sukuna surveyed his assembled Shikigami, noting the transformed atmosphere. Where earlier there had been resentment and discontent, now there was anticipation, purpose. It was, he reflected, not unlike the change he himself had experienced in this new life, this evolution from isolation to connection. I have existed for centuries, he told them, his voice carrying an unusual note of reflection. First as the king of curses, then as a fragmented consciousness, having had my memories convoluted, now finally in this integrated form. Throughout both incarnations, you have been constant extensions of my will, manifestations of my power. Yet I have never truly acknowledged what you are beyond those functions. He paused, seeming to search for words, another uncharacteristic display from the usually articulate being. In this new world, with these new challenges, perhaps it is time for all of us to evolve, to become more than what we were created to be. The cherry blossoms swirled around them, responding to the shift in Sukuna's emotional state. For a moment, the domain seemed to pulse with possibilities, with potential futures branching out in directions none of them had previously considered. Now, Sukuna said, his tone returning to something closer to his usual authority, though tempered with a new awareness. I believe you all have preparations to make. Tomorrow begins a new chapter in our long association. The Shikigami bowed in unison, a gesture of respect, but also of genuine appreciation. As Sukuna's form began to dissolve back into cherry blossoms, returning his consciousness to the physical world, White couldn't resist one final question. Master, he called, does this mean I can come out during poker games too? Sukuna paused, his form already half-transparent. For a moment, White feared he had overstepped. Then, to everyone's amazement, the King of Curses laughed a sound so unexpected that several of the Shikigami physically startled. We'll see, White, he replied, amusement still coloring his voice. We'll see. As his presence faded completely, the domain seemed lighter somehow, more vibrant. The cherry blossoms fell more gently, the light shone more warmly, and the air itself seemed to hum with a new energy. Well, Great Serpent said into the stunned silence that followed, that was not what I expected. Did the master just laugh? Morn Tiger asked, sounding bewildered. And make a joke? Nu added, equally confused. Ribbit? Toad confirmed, sounding as shocked as the rest. They all turned to Maharaga, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. The Divine General's wheel was spinning at a steady, contented pace. You knew, White accused, though without real anger. You knew he would respond this way. I suspected, Maharaga corrected. As I said, the master has changed. More than any of you realize. For the better, it seems, Round Deer observed quietly. Indeed, Maharaga agreed, his will spinning in what might have been satisfaction. For all of us. As the Shikigami dispersed to prepare for their new responsibilities, a sense of anticipation replaced their earlier discontent. The domain itself seemed to respond, the eternal cherry blossoms blooming more vibrantly, the paths between buildings growing clearer, the boundaries between their individual spaces becoming less distinct. Change had come to the realm of the 10 shadows, change that reflected the evolution of their master. And for beings created to serve, to fight, to die if necessary, this new purpose, this chance to be more than weapons, was perhaps the greatest gift they could have received. Even if they still had to share him with Maharaga. As I said, and promised, hello everyone, I have dropped the first chapter of my new fanfic. As Goku Black and apparently a dad in DC, sorry about it not being Shadow Monarch, saw another have already won in DC. This is the summary. So, I've apparently reincarnated twice. First I was me, then I was Zamasu without my first life's memories, and now I am in apparently freaking DC, and I'm apparently the adoptive dad to reincarnated main and side characters from other shows. At least I lost my god complex, right? Well, to a certain extent at least. You can't really stop thinking yourself superior when you have the power to destroy the universe at the tip of your fingers. Well, let's see what I can do with this crazy new life. That was the summary. I think this is more interesting since, as I said earlier, I saw that there is already a Shadow Monarch in DC fanfic, and an Archangel or conventional magic just makes life super easy, while I wish to write a slice of life FIC without just magically conjuring everything and altering reality. So yeah, I hope to see you guys there. Bye. Bonds of convenience. Sukuna rose from the tangled sheets, his movements fluid and predatory despite the night's exertions. The morning light filtered through the traditional paper screens, casting golden patterns across the bedroom floor and illuminating the two women still sleeping in his wake. Yorozu lay curled on her side, her newly incarnated body bearing marks of their encounter, bruises blooming across her pale skin like dark flowers, evidence of passion that bordered on violence. Beside her, Kenjaku slept in a more composed position, her back straight even in unconsciousness, her breathing measured and controlled. Ever the strategist even in repose. Sukuna studied them briefly, his expression unreadable as he considered the events of the previous night. The exploration of connection had been informative. There was power in such bonds, he was certain of it now. Not the sentimental attachment humans prized, but something more primal, more fundamental, an exchange of energies that transcended the merely physical. He moved silently to the sliding door, stepping out onto the veranda that overlooked the estate's expansive gardens. The morning air was crisp against his naked skin, carrying the scent of cherry blossoms and distant mountains. The Kyoto countryside stretched before him, a tapestry of traditional beauty that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. Sukuna breathed deeply, allowing the clean mountain air to fill his lungs. His mind turned once again to the revelations of recent weeks, to his counterpart, who had somehow transcended the limitations that still bound him, who had bent reality itself to his will through connections Sukuna had always dismissed as weakness. The evidence was undeniable. If he wished to surpass his counterpart, he would need to explore this path further. Last night had been merely the beginning of physical connection that scratched only the surface of what might be possible. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden disturbance in the air above the garden. The sky rippled, reality itself seeming to fold inward as a swirling green portal materialized approximately 20 feet above the immaculate landscape. Sukuna's body tensed instantly, cursed energy gathering around him in preparation for an attack. His eyes narrowed as a figure emerged from the dimensional tear, a man in a dark costume with a cape that billowed dramatically behind him as he descended to hover several feet above the garden. Sinister Mark. The variant's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes as he surveyed the scene before him. His gaze lingered on Sukuna's unclothed form, his expression tightening with mild disgust. "I'd rather not see a man naked unless he's cut up and boiling in a stove," Sinister Mark commented, his tone casual despite the grotesque sentiment. "Perhaps you could make yourself more presentable for our conversation?" Sukuna sked in annoyance, reaching into his shadow with practiced ease. The 10 shadows technique responded instantly, darkness coalescing as from it rose a simple black robe that he wrapped around himself with unhurried movements. "Better?" he asked, his voice carrying that imperial quality that brooked no argument. Before Sinister Mark could respond, Uram appeared at the veranda entrance, her expression alert and wary. Her arrival was silent but immediate. She had sensed the fluctuation in her master's cursed energy and responded accordingly, as she had for years. "Sukuna-sama," she acknowledged, her eyes never leaving the hovering intruder. "Shall I eliminate this trespasser?" "Stand down," Yakuna commanded, his tone leaving no room for discussion. "You are not his match." Sinister Mark's smirk widened at this assessment, a flicker of genuine amusement crossing his features. "Wise decision. I'd hate to deprive you of such a devoted servant over a simple misunderstanding." Yuram's expression remained neutral, though her eyes hardened slightly at being dismissed so casually. She awaited further instructions, her posture indicating readiness despite Yakuna's command. "Prepare food," Yakuna instructed her, his gaze still fixed on Sinister Mark. "To my preferences. Our guest apparently shares my tastes in cuisine." Understanding dawned in Yuram's eyes. Yakuna's preferences in food were well documented throughout history. Human flesh, prepared with the exquisite care only she could provide. "As you wish, Sukuna-sama," she replied, bowing slightly before retreating into the house. Once they were alone, Yakuna turned his full attention to Sinister Mark, who had descended to stand on the garden path below the veranda. "Why are you here?" Yakuna demanded without preamble. "And how did you breach the dimensional barriers?" Sinister Mark strolled casually through the garden, examining a particularly beautiful cherry blossom with feigned interest. "Lovely place you have here. Very traditional. I've always preferred more modern aesthetics myself, steel and glass, clean lines, minimalist design. Though I do appreciate the statement made by surrounding oneself with antiquities. It speaks to a certain historical perspective." He plucked the cherry blossom, rolling the delicate petals between his fingers until they crushed into a pink smear. "As for your cuisine preferences, human meat is fine for novelty, I suppose, but I found Viltrumite flesh to be far superior. The density of the muscle tissue creates a unique texture when properly prepared. And the marrow." He kissed his fingertips in an exaggerated chef's gesture. "Exquisite." Yakuna's patience, never abundant to begin with, began to wear thin. "Cut to the point," he commanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Why are you here?" Sinister Mark finally turned to face him directly, his affected casualness giving way to something more focused, more calculated. "To get here," he began, his tone shifting to business-like efficiency, "required extraordinary measures. I needed the remains of my world's angstrom levy, his research, and an insane amount of human sacrifices, a couple 100,000, give or take. Add some arcane magic, demonic summonings and enslavements, and eventually I created a machine capable of traversing dimensions." He shrugged, as if discussing nothing more consequential than a minor inconvenience. "It's still limited, unfortunately. I can only travel to worlds where I've interacted with a resident. Hence my ability to reach you." Yakuna processed this information with clinical detachment. The casual mention of hundreds of thousands of deaths meant nothing to him. Humans were abundant, their lives insignificant in the grand scheme. What interested him was the technology, the capability to move between dimensions at will. "And your purpose?" he pressed, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Sinister Mark's smile returned, sharper now, more predatory. "You must have noticed the bond between our counterparts, the Emperor and his precious Megumi, even the relationship between Megumi and his own Mark. Quite formidable together, aren't they?" He ascended the steps to the veranda, closing the distance between them with measured steps. "Which brings me to my proposition. Let's work together." Yakuna's expression remained impassive, though his interest was genuinely piqued. "Elaborate. Before coming here, I studied your world a bit. Flew around a little here," Sinister Mark continued. "Fascinating system you have. Jujutsu, though most prominently these binding vows. A way to formalize agreements with supernatural enforcement. Perfect for our purposes." He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "I propose a binding vow between us, no loopholes, complete trust, absolute cooperation. The Emperor achieved his position because of his Sukuna, and that Sukuna grew so powerful through his connections, particularly to his marks. We should explore that same path. Sinister Mark's voice took on an almost fervent quality, his eyes gleaming with ambition. True connection, true friendship. We share the same tastes in food, in control, in domination, in being worshipped. Together, there would be nothing we couldn't achieve. He began to pace the veranda, his cape swirling dramatically with each turn. We could rule countless worlds, evolve to a point where we transcend mere existence, become gods beyond human deification or comprehension. Sukuna considered the proposal with careful deliberation. The parallels to his own recent conclusions were striking, the recognition that connection might indeed be a path to greater power, that bonds could be leveraged for advancement rather than dismissed as weakness. His counterpart had achieved unprecedented abilities through his relationships with others. The Emperor had conquered 17 galaxies with the guidance of his Megumi. The evidence was compelling. And yet, trust was not something that came naturally to the King of Curses. For centuries, he had relied solely on himself, viewing all others as either tools or obstacles. Even Uram, his most devoted servant, was kept at a careful distance, valued for her utility rather than any deeper connection. But the dimensional merger had changed everything. The glimpse of his counterpart's capabilities had forced him to reconsider long-held assumptions, to question the path he had walked for so long. If connection truly offered a route to transcendence, then perhaps this alliance was worth exploring. Not out of sentiment or genuine friendship, such concepts remained foreign to his nature, but as a strategic decision, a calculated step toward surpassing his counterpart. A binding vow, Sukuna said finally, testing the concept aloud, with absolute terms. No betrayal possible from either party. Sinister Mark nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Precisely. A supernatural guarantee of our alliance. No need to waste energy on suspicion or contingencies against each other. All our focus directed outward, toward our mutual goals. Sukuna weighed the potential benefits against the risks. The vow would bind them both equally. Neither could betray the other without facing supernatural consequences. It would be a true partnership, not the master-servant dynamic he typically preferred. But if it led to the power he sought, the ability to manipulate the heavens themselves as his counterpart had done. Very well, Sukuna decided, his tactical mind having calculated all variables and found the proposition acceptable. We will form this bond. Sinister Mark's smile widened. A predator who had successfully lured in his prey, or perhaps who had been lured himself. With beings of their caliber, such distinctions often blurred. Excellent, he said, extending his hand. Shall we begin? Sukuna studied the offered hand for a moment, then nodded once, a regal acknowledgement. The ritual requires specific preparations. Come inside. We will formalize our agreement properly. As they turned toward the house, the morning sun cast their shadows across the veranda. Two figures from different worlds, different origins, now bound by mutual ambition and the pursuit of power beyond mortal comprehension. The binding vow would seal their alliance, creating a connection that neither could break. Whether that connection would lead to their ascension or their downfall remained to be seen. But for Sukuna, the King of Curses, it was a calculated risk worth taking. After all, if his counterpart could achieve transcendence through bonds, then so could he on his own terms, following his own path to power. The door slid closed behind them, sealing away the morning light as they prepared to forge a pact that would shake the foundations of multiple worlds. The royal procession wound through the streets of New Viltrum, the capital city that had once been called Washington, D.C., before the merger of Earth and Viltrumite civilizations. 17 years of imperial rule had transformed the city beyond recognition. Gleaming spires of crystal and adamantium reached toward the heavens. Roads of perfectly smooth material that seemed to absorb and redirect light flowed between buildings, designed with both beauty and function in mind. Adam Eve sat in the central hover transport, her posture perfect, her expression composed as she acknowledged the crowds that had gathered to witness her passage. As Grand Regent of the Empire in the Emperor's absence, she had maintained this ritual for 17 years, a weekly tour through the capital to remind the people that despite their Emperor's absence, his vision continued to guide them. Beside her, Sukuna and Eve watched with undisguised fascination as citizens human and Viltrumite alike bowed or saluted as the procession passed. Children threw flowers that floated on air currents specifically designed to carry them to the royal transport. "They love you," Eve observed, studying her counterpart with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Eve's smile was gentle but carried a hint of correction. "They love him," she replied, nodding toward Sukuna. "I am merely the caretaker of his legacy." Sukuna remained silent, his expression thoughtful as he observed the adoration of a populace he had never directly ruled. It was strange seeing the fruits of decisions made by a version of himself he had only recently confirmed existed within his past. "The Eastern District is particularly enthusiastic today," Eve noted, gesturing toward a section of the crowd where the cheering seemed most fervent. "They've just received the new educational enhancements you designed before you were taken from us. Their children are thriving with the integrated learning systems." The procession turned onto a broad avenue lined with trees whose cherry leaves shimmered in the morning light. "Grand Regent," a voice called from the crowd, somehow carrying above the general din. Eve's attention immediately focused on the source, a woman holding a child who appeared to be about 5 years old. With a subtle gesture, Eve halted the procession and descended from the transport, moving with graceful efficiency through the security perimeter that immediately formed around her. Sukuna and Eve exchanged glances before following, curious about this break in protocol. As they approached, the woman knelt, still holding her child. "Grand Regent," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This is my daughter Megumi." Eve's composure softened visibly as she knelt to the child's level. "Hello, Megumi," she said gently. "That's a very special name." The little girl nodded solemnly. "Mama says I'm named after the Emperor, the one who saved us all." Eve glanced up at the mother, who was watching Sukuna with dawning recognition, her eyes widening. Is it truly him?" the woman whispered, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. "Has the Emperor returned?" Eve hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes, Alara. He has returned to us," she stated, knowing the name of everyone in the Empire. The news spread through the crowd like wildfire, murmurs becoming exclamations of joy, then chants that grew in volume until they echoed off the buildings. "The Emperor lives! The Emperor has returned!" Sukuna stood perfectly still as the adulation washed over him, his expression unreadable. Eve moved closer to him, her hand finding his in silent support. The little girl named Megumi stared up at Sukuna with solemn eyes. "Are you going to stay this time?" she asked with the directness only a child could manage. Before Sukuna could respond, a new group approached 12 figures in gleaming armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each wore a helmet shaped like a different animal, and they moved with the disciplined precision of elite warriors. "The Royal Knights," Eve explained quietly. "Your personal guard, created according to your specifications before the incident." The knights formed a perfect semicircle before Sukuna, then knelt in perfect unison, their right fists pressed against their hearts. Emperor Fushiguro, the central figure, intoned, his helmet shaped like a wolf's head. "We have maintained our vigil as commanded. The Empire stands strong, your vision preserved, your people protected. Rise," Sukuna said, his voice carrying that unmistakable authority that seemed inherent to his being, regardless of which life he was experiencing. The knight stood, and the wolf-helmed leader removed his helmet, revealing a face marked with ritual scars that formed patterns reminiscent of Sukuna's own markings. His eyes, cybernetically enhanced, glowed with a soft blue light. "Commander Thax," Eve introduced, "leader of the Royal Knights and the most decorated warrior in the Empire after yourself and Mark." Thax bowed his head slightly. "My life is the Emperor's, as it has been since he saved me during the Regelian conflict." Sukuna studied the man, noting the absolute devotion in his stance, his expression. This was not mere loyalty to a ruler, this was reverence for a savior. A transformative figure who had fundamentally altered the course of this man's existence. "The knights would be honored to escort you to the Imperial Citadel," Thax continued. The people have waited 17 years for your return. They deserve to witness their emperor's triumph over death itself. Adam Eve stepped forward. Commander, the emperor has only just returned. There will be time for public ceremonies after he has had opportunity to rest and reacclimate. Thax immediately bowed. Of course, Grand Regent. Forgiveness for my presumption. Sukuna observed the interaction with interest, noting the absolute respect the commander showed Adam Eve despite his clear eagerness to celebrate the return of his emperor. It spoke volumes about the authority she had established in his absence, not merely maintained, but earned. The Grand Regent speaks wisely, Sukuna said, his voice carrying to the assembled crowd. I have indeed returned, but there is much I must understand about the Empire's current state before I address my people formally. A murmur of disappointment rippled through the gathering, but it was tempered with understanding and respect. Until then, Sukuna continued, know that I am pleased with what I see. The vision continues. The work progresses. The Empire thrives. The cheers that erupted were deafening. A release of 17 years of grief, hope, and patience. Adam Eve watched Sukuna with an expression that contained too many emotions to name: pride, relief, longing, and something deeper that she kept carefully controlled. The procession resumed, now with the royal knights forming an honor guard around the hover transport. As they continued through the city, Adam Eve pointed out notable developments: the Quantum Research Institute that had pioneered breakthroughs in faster-than-light communication, the Medical Advancement Center where Viltrumite and human doctors work together to extend human lifespans and treat previously incurable conditions, the Cultural Integration Pavilion where art and knowledge from 100 worlds were preserved and shared. All of this, she explained, follows the blueprint you created, the 17-phase plan for Earth's transformation from conquered world to Imperial Center. Eve, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. You've accomplished all this in just 17 years? Adam Eve's smile held pride tempered with humility. We had an excellent foundation. Megumi had already anticipated most challenges, prepared contingencies for virtually every obstacle. I merely implemented. You're being modest, Sukuna observed, his eyes scanning the city. Implementation at this scale requires more than following instructions. It demands vision, adaptability, leadership. A faint blush colored Adam Eve's cheeks at the praise. I had excellent advisors. Mark, though changed by grief, never wavered in his commitment to your vision. And Toji, well, he provided a certain practical perspective that proved invaluable when dealing with resistance. The transport began to ascend, rising above the city toward a massive structure that floated in the sky above a perfect geometric shape that seemed to be constructed of crystal and living metal, shifting subtly as it caught the light. The Imperial Citadel, Adam Eve announced. Your home, and the administrative center of the Empire. As they approached, the structure seemed to recognize them, portions of its crystalline surface becoming transparent to reveal intricate internal architecture: gardens, living quarters, research facilities, and at its heart, a massive chamber that could only be the throne room. It's beautiful, Eve breathed, already analyzing the seemingly impossible engineering. It's alive, Adam Eve explained. A biomechanical construct designed according to Megumi's specifications. It learns, adapts, evolves according to the needs of its inhabitants. The transport docked at an entry port that opened precisely as they approached, the timing so perfect it seemed choreographed. As they disembarked, a delegation of officials waited to greet them, humans and Viltrumites in formal attire that blended styles from both cultures. The Imperial Council, Adam Eve explained quietly. Representatives from each sector of the Empire. They've governed alongside me during your absence. A distinguished Viltrumite female stepped forward, her bearing regal despite her obvious deference to Adam Eve. Grand Regent, she acknowledged with a slight bow, then turned to Sukuna. Emperor Fushiguro, the council welcomes your return and stands ready to brief you on all matters of state. Thank you, Counselor Tila, Adam Eve replied smoothly. However, the Emperor requires rest after his interdimensional journey. The Council's report can wait until tomorrow. Tila bowed immediately. Of course, Grand Regent. We serve at your pleasure. As the council members dispersed, Sukuna noted the efficiency with which Adam Eve managed them, firm but respectful, maintaining authority without requiring displays of dominance. It was a leadership style he recognized as similar to his own preferred approach, at least in theory of his first life and implementation of this one as well. Adam Eve led them through the citadel's corridors, the structure adjusting its lighting and temperature as they passed, anticipating their needs with uncanny precision. Guards and servants they encountered all showed the same deep respect, bowing or saluting as appropriate, their expressions revealing genuine devotion rather than mere obligation. Your quarters remain as you left them, Adam Eve explained, as they approached a massive doorway that seemed to be carved from a single piece of some unknown material. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. The door recognized Sukuna immediately, sliding open to reveal a suite of rooms that blended luxury with functionality. The space was elegant but not ostentatious, designed for comfort and efficiency rather than display. This feels familiar, Sukuna murmured, moving through the space with growing recognition. The layout, the furnishings, even the color palette resonated with his aesthetic preferences. It should, Adam Eve said softly. You designed it yourself. Said it reminded you of a place from your childhood, a traditional Japanese home with modern adaptations. Eve wandered to a wall lined with books, actual physical volumes rather than digital replacements. These are all first editions, she noted with surprise. Some of these are museum pieces where we come from. Megumi valued knowledge in its original form, Adam Eve explained, watching Sukuna as he examined a chess set made from materials not found on Earth. He said digital copies lost something essential: the texture of the pages, the smell of the binding, the weight of the ideas made physical. Sukuna picked up a chess piece, the king, and turned it in his fingers. The piece seemed to respond to his touch, warming slightly, its surface shifting to better fit his grip. Memory reactive materials, Adam Eve explained. They remember their owner, adapt to provide optimal tactile experience. A door at the far end of the main chamber slid open, revealing a bedroom of surprising simplicity given the grandeur of the rest of the citadel. A large bed dominated the space, its frame carved from what appeared to be a single piece of dark wood, its surface inlaid with patterns that matched the markings on Sukuna's skin. I'll leave you to rest, Adam Eve said, though her tone suggested the offer was more formality than genuine expectation. There's much to discuss, but it can wait until you've had time to process everything. Sukuna studied her for a long moment, noting the careful control she maintained, the way she held herself slightly apart despite her obvious desire to be closer. 17 years of waiting, of preserving his legacy, of ruling in his stead while never claiming his place. It was a devotion that transcended ordinary loyalty. Stay, he said simply. Both of you. We have much to discuss, and rest can wait. Adam Eve's composure slipped slightly, relief and something deeper flickering across her features before she controlled them once more. As you wish. The three moved to a sitting area where comfortable chairs arranged around a low table adjusted themselves as they approached, conforming to their individual preferences for height, firmness, and support. Tell me, Sukuna said as they settled, about the Empire. Not the public face you showed during the procession, but the reality. The challenges, the threats, the true state of our position. Adam Eve straightened, shifting seamlessly from companion to Grand Regent. The Empire spans 17 galaxies, as Mark may have mentioned. Our primary challenges come from three sources. The Coalition of Free Worlds, which opposes our expansion on ideological grounds. The Chiularian Dominion, which contests our control of key resource planets. And internal resistance movements on newly incorporated worlds. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the table, showing a three-dimensional map of the known universe with the Empire highlighted in blue. Our military position remains strong, she continued. The Viltrumite forces, supplemented by elite human units trained in your combat methodologies, maintain order throughout Imperial space. The economic integration proceeds according to Phase 15 of your plan, with resource distribution at 87% efficiency, 3% ahead of projected targets. Eve leaned forward, studying the display. And the people? How do they fare under imperial rule? Eve's expression softened with genuine pride. Better than they ever did under their previous governments. Poverty has been eliminated throughout the core worlds. Disease is managed through advanced medical technology available to all citizens regardless of status. Education is universal and comprehensive. And freedom? Eve pressed, her tone neutral but her question pointed. Defined differently than in your original world, Eve acknowledged. There are restrictions on certain activities, those that harm others or undermine social cohesion. But within those boundaries, citizens enjoy more meaningful freedom than most had before the empire. Freedom from want, from fear, from the tyranny of corrupt local officials or corporate exploitation. Sukuna absorbed this information, comparing it to his own evolving philosophy on governance and control. It aligned remarkably well with conclusions he had reached independently in his current life, that true freedom required structure, that chaos was not liberty but merely a different form of oppression. And your role in all this? He asked Eve directly. Grand Regent is an impressive title, but what has it meant in practice? Eve's hands clasped in her lap, the only visible sign of emotion as she answered. In practice, it has meant 17 years of implementing your vision while preserving your legacy. Balancing the needs of humans against the expectations of Viltrumites. Maintaining the Empire's expansion while ensuring that expansion served a purpose beyond mere conquest. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. It has meant 17 years of waiting, of knowing you might never return, yet refusing to abandon hope. Of ruling without claiming the throne that many urged me to take. Many wanted you to declare yourself empress? Eve asked, surprised. Eve nodded. The empire needed stability. A single, clear authority. The council, the military leadership. But you refused, Sukuna stated rather than asked. I refused, she confirmed simply. I knew you would return. Somehow, someday you would return. And for me to do so would need me to establish an imperial line, in which case I would need to marry, which I of course refused. Besides that, of course, Mark had them all executed for their demands. Show me your work, Sukuna requested suddenly. Not reports or statistics. Show me what you have built with your own hands, your own mind. Eve blinked, then smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her features, making her appear younger. More like the Eve they knew from their own dimension. I'd be honored, she said, rising. Though it might require a small journey. They left the Imperial Citadel aboard a smaller, more discreet transport that Eve piloted herself. As they flew over the city and beyond, she explained that while most of her work had been administrative and diplomatic, she had maintained one personal project throughout the years. The transport descended toward what appeared to be an ordinary mountain range outside the capital. As they approached, however, portions of the landscape shimmered and disappeared, revealing a massive complex built into and through the mountains themselves. An illusion? Eve asked, her scientific curiosity piqued. Molecular camouflage, Eve corrected. The facility exists in plain sight, but the light passing through it is redirected to create the appearance of unbroken landscape. They landed on a platform that extended from the mountainside, the structure recognizing Eve and adapting to receive them. As they disembarked, the air around them hummed with energy, not threatening, but alive with purpose. Welcome, Eve said with quiet pride, to the Genesis Institute. Inside, the facility revealed itself as a marvel of scientific advancement. Laboratories filled with equipment beyond cutting edge, research spaces where scientists of multiple species worked in collaborative harmony, and at its heart, a massive chamber dominated by what appeared to be a miniature sun suspended in a containment field. My life's work, Eve explained, her voice soft with reverence. A self-sustaining energy source that draws power from the space between dimensions. Clean, unlimited, and impossible to weaponize. Eve moved closer to the containment field, her expression one of professional awe. This is revolutionary. The applications are endless. It's based on our research, Eve told her. Your theories about molecular manipulation at the quantum level. I merely expanded on them. Sukuna observed the interaction between the two Eves with interest, the respect they showed each other, the genuine appreciation for each other's capabilities. There was currently, unlike before, no jealousy, no competition, only recognition of shared brilliance expressed through different paths. This will transform countless worlds, Sukuna observed, understanding immediately the implications of such technology. Energy independence removes one of the primary causes of conflict throughout the universe. Adam Eve nodded. That was the intention, to create something that would further your vision of an empire built on cooperation rather than mere subjugation. To show that imperial rule could bring benefits impossible under fragmented governance. They spent hours touring the facility, Adam Eve explaining her work with growing animation as she shared discoveries and breakthroughs she had achieved during the long years of waiting. Her scientific passion was evident, revealing a side of her that had perhaps been suppressed beneath the weight of imperial governance. By the time they returned to the imperial citadel, night had fallen over the capital. The city glowed beneath them, a testament to the order and prosperity that Adam Eve had maintained in Sukuna's absence. They retired to the imperial quarters, the day's experiences settling over them, tiring them. Eve excused herself to explore the adjacent guest chambers, her scientific curiosity drawing her to examine the living architecture of the citadel more closely. Alone in the imperial bedroom, Adam Eve's carefully maintained composure began to slip. 17 years of discipline, of restraint, of waiting, all crashing against the reality of Sukuna's return. "I've tried to be patient," she said quietly, her back to him as she gazed out at the city lights. "To give you time to adjust, to understand, to remember. But seeing you here, in these rooms, in this place we built together." She turned, and visible in her eyes was the loneliness, the determination, the unwavering faith that had sustained her through nearly 2 decades of separation. "I've held myself back," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm tired now. I've gone too long, too many years without your embrace." Adam Eve moved toward him, giving way to emotional need that had been contained for far too long. Without hesitation, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that carried 17 years of longing, of devotion, of love preserved against impossible odds. The kiss deepened, becoming something more primal, more desperate, a minute stretching into eternity, as she poured everything she had kept contained into this single connection. When they finally separated, Sukuna studied her face, the familiar yet more mature features that mirrored Eve's. He reached up, his finger tracing gently along her cheek, down to the sensitive skin of her neck. His touch was deliberate, exploring, as if mapping territory both familiar and new. With a precision that spoke to his absolute control, he activated dismantle, not to harm but to remove the barriers between them. Her clothing fell away in perfectly cut sections, leaving her exposed yet unharmed. Adam Eve gasped softly, but made no move to cover herself. Instead, she watched with anticipation as Sukuna guided her backward until her legs met the edge of the bed. With gentle pressure, he pushed her down onto the mattress, following to position himself above her. A deliberate cough from the doorway drew their attention. Eve stood there, her expression a complex mixture of jealousy, amusement, and desire. "Have you forgotten someone?" she asked, her voice carrying a hint of challenge. Without hesitation or explanation, Sukuna extended his hand toward her, a subtle application of dismantle reducing her clothing to precisely cut fragments that fell away to reveal naked form as well. Eve's soft cry of surprise quickly transformed into something else as Sukuna beckoned her forward with a simple gesture with his finger. She moved toward the bed and crawled onto the mattress to join them. Adam Eve shifted to make room, but her eyes held a question as she looked at Sukuna. "Can you?" she began, then hesitated, uncharacteristic shyness overcoming her usual directness. "I've seen footage from the other world when you were fighting Conquest. Before you detransformed, you had another form." Sukuna's brow furrowed slightly in confusion. "I want to know every part of you," Adam Eve explained, her voice gaining confidence. "To know you now as I knew you before, completely, fully." Sukuna considered her request in silence. Then, with deliberate grace, He moved back from the bed, creating space between them. His form began to shift, expanding, transforming, additional arms emerging, his height increasing until he towered above them both. His skin marked with tattoos shifting, his hair turning into a rose color. The two women watched in fascination, their blushes deepening as they beheld the King of Curses in his true form, powerful, majestic, transcendent. For arms reached toward them. Two pairs of eyes gazed upon them with intensity that promised complete attention, complete awareness of every sensation, every reaction. The King of Curses had returned to his empire. And in the arms of two women who loved him, he began to fully embrace this reclaimed aspect of his complex life. Comment on your favorite young adult fantasy audiobooks. And if you want more of them, check our other videos for more recommendations. Thanks for watching. Like if you like, and don't forget to subscribe.